Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the West Melbourne City Council in a meeting to order. It's October 18, 2022. If you'd stand for the pledge and a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, roll call City Council, please.
Mayor Rose.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Young.
Here.
Councilmember Bentley.
Here.
Councilmember Ditmore.
Here.
Councilmember Frampus.
Here.
Councilmember McDowell. Here. Councilmember Adams.
Here.
Thank you. It's good to have everyone here tonight, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the West Melbourne City Council meeting on this 18th day of October 2022. Members of the public are welcome to speak on any issue, whether it's on tonight's agenda or anything of importance to you. Each speaker who wishes to speak should fill out a speaker card. They're located by the front door, and we'll allocate 3 minutes to speak to council. Please direct all your comments through this chair. Our first item tonight is a Beautification Award from Keep Brevard Beautiful. KBB, if you'd come up and tell us what you have there.
Thank you. So for over 30 years, Keep Brevard Beautiful has had an award that is given to public areas that are over and above. Everyone knows that we all have city rules and regulations and minimum requirements for landscaping. However, those businesses, those HOAs, those parks that have gone just over and above anything that is required of them catches our eye. So Keep Brevard Beautiful is proud to present the City of West Melbourne with the We Notice Beautification Award. This has been given to places up and down Brevard County, precious few. So thank you so much for your efforts with the wall project. We were quite amazed, actually. Everyone knows City of West Melbourne. You guys have a lot here, a lot of businesses, a lot of people, so there's not a lot of room for more, for more beautification, for these extra projects. But with the help of the former deputy city manager, Keith Mills, and trying to start to get this off the ground with you guys proposing as a council to get this beautification up and running is fantastic. It's heartwarming and it's inspirational for other local municipalities to join in with what you all have started. And again, the inspiration to do something a little bit extra. Everybody knows the lift stations. You got to have them. Wastewater's got to go somewhere. So to have that lovely pipe right in front of where you guys meet for your council chambers, it was a wonderful idea to decorate that, to have something that includes Florida native vegetation with the palms, and you're gonna have flowers here coming in, knowing that it took less than a year really to get this in the ground and planned, really fantastic. With the Susan Hall landscape architecture and Deep Roots working together with you all, and then Council Member Bradford kind of stepping in and guiding you guys, just fantastic. So we're delighted to have I don't know, the gusto, the inspiration that you guys have had, and the ability to bring together those resources. It was just really, again, inspirational for us. And so you guys, on behalf of Keep Brevard Beautiful, will have a little award. You've got a sign out front by the wall. That way people, as they pass by, whether they're residents or potentially people from other areas driving past, they know that your efforts have been recognized, and that the idea of beautifying our area, hopefully they take home with them, whether it's their personal private property or something bigger like an HOA or another municipality. So thank you so much on behalf of Keep Brevard Beautiful for your efforts, and to just, again, keep going forward. We're delighted with some of the progress that the City of West Melbourne has done. and composting, and you guys are getting into the forefront of some of this environmental movement. So thank you again. You guys will now officially be, for a year, with Keep Brevard Beautiful honorary members. So in this pamphlet, we've got all the different programs, secret garden tours, which I'm sure some of your residents will be involved with, and local schools like West Melbourne School for Science here next door. There's so many programs, but again, you guys just doing beautification have helped just embrace that environmental movement and keeping Brevard beautiful. So thank you very much. Congratulations on the award. And where should I put this? Do I give this to Cynthia or? Okay.
City of West Melbourne for your beautification. All right, etc. Now we appreciate all this, and this is just not to hide the sewer kind of stuff, which we all do, but it's really the center of our city. We're very proud of this. There's a picture of it. We're blocking the beautification stuff, but you know, let's just look to the side and see it. It's great. We appreciate you recognizing it. All right. Chief, you know the routine. You got a couple new police officers.
You, sir.
We introduce them. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. If I could have Kevin Sweeney and Nicholas Yip join me up here. These gentlemen are our two newest police officers. They started here recently. I'm going to begin with Kevin Sweeney. After almost 20 years in the United States Army, Kevin decided to make a career change and attend the police academy at Eastern Florida. He started in April. He navigated that program, graduating in September, on September 21st. By the way, I was not able to attend his graduation because I was here. Nicholas Yip started with us a couple weeks ago after attending the equivalency of training, also at Eastern Florida. He came to us from the state of New York, specifically a little agency that you might have heard of before, NYPD. Both of these gentlemen are currently in our orientation phase of training, and we're excited to get them started and hit the streets real soon with some of our FTOs. With that being said, I'll give them each an opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves.
I guess I'll go first. Hi, guys. So my name is Nicholas Yip. I moved down here from New York. I live currently in West Melbourne. I was in law enforcement for almost 2 years up in New York and decided to come down here because I wanted to actually do some policing that was actually going to matter, as you all know from the news. And I'm excited, and I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to serve and protect the community down in West Melbourne.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Sweeney. Thank you for having me here tonight. I just retired from the military, as Chief was just explaining, after a really long time in the Army. So I'm excited to be here at West Melbourne and be a new hire at the police department. I'm married, have 2 daughters at home, and I look forward to this opportunity to continue my service here. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell. So any questions for me?
Where were you before here? Where did you live?
Colorado. So
Colorado
for a really long time, about 6 years, and then we moved out here to try to get away from the cold a little bit. But I'm a native Floridian, so it's good to be back home.
All right. Very good, Kevin. Thank you. All right. Thank you, KBB. And next up, we have our public hearing section of the meeting. We have 5 public hearings tonight, and while she's getting that set up, our first public hearing is annexation of property located at 1340 South Wickham Road in West Melbourne.
Okay, council, just for the record, my name is Christy Fisher. I'm the city's planning director, and the agenda item 5A, this is the second time coming before you about the annexation. So the address of the property, it has an existing use, an existing business on it, is 1340 South Wickham. And these are the images. The aerial on the left, shows you sort of the red rectangle or square, and that's the property that we're talking about. And then that little map with the little red rectangle shows you, roughly where it is compared to our city limits, which are sort of shown in brown. Annexation notices were sent to surrounding property owners like we do any annexation. Same thing with the rezoning and the comprehensive plan amendment, which are items B and C on the agenda. We didn't get any feedback from any of the neighbors, so just FYI. So currently with this property, it is being used as retail nursery and hardscape business. I don't see Mr. Corella. Maybe he got caught in the rain. Oh, he is here? This was formerly known as Rising Stars Academy Daycare until 2012. It had other uses after that. I think we went over that it is connected to the City of Melbourne water. It is on a septic system. Annexation, according to Florida statute, happens. It needs to happen for urban services. So, he would be able to connect to the city sewer, should the sewer system, fail. And for us, in terms of meeting the Florida statutes and the location of it, it is adjacent to our city limits, so it makes sense that it would be something that we would annex in. Some of the services continue to be the same, like the fire, and now City of West Melbourne Police would serve it. And the city attorney does review it for conformance with the Florida statutes. Here's some property photos. One view, the top view, is kind of, diagonally from that corner of Pinecrest and Wickham. And then you've got some other views of both sort of the side, and the front is the outdoor living paver display area, but Mr. Corella could tell you a little bit more about that. All right, so for the city, the area shown in sort of that shaded blue is in the city's redevelopment area, and it's actually a joint city-county redevelopment area. This property is not in that area, but it's right next to it. So it makes sense that we would also have that B-zone commercial Wickham the way that the rest of the community redevelopment area is zoned. And then with the comprehensive plan and the rezoning, that's what you're going to hear next. But again, just know that there's an existing business, so we want to keep it with something that allows the business to continue. So with that, what staff is recommending is if you all can make the motion to approve the second reading. Again, this is a second reading, we already did the first reading, and that's of Ordinance 2022-21, which would annex this property into the City of West Melbourne. And if I could ask our city attorney to read the title, please.
Ordinance number 2022-21, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, annexing by voluntary petition a parcel of land approximately 0.83 acres located at 1340 South Wickham Road, and as more fully described herein, finding that the area being annexed is reasonably compact and contiguous to the city, that the annexation of the property does not create an enclave, and that the annexation of the property otherwise complies with Florida law, amending the corporate boundaries of the city to provide for the incorporation of the real property described herein, providing for filing of the revised city boundaries with the Department of State, providing for repeal of prior inconsistent ordinances and resolutions, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. This is second reading.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Does anybody from the public wish to address City Council? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd make a motion we approve the second reading of ordinance number 2022-21, annexing the property at 1340 South Wickham Road.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
I'll second.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question about that sliver of property that is north of that. What is that
To the
piece?
north is actually the Melbourne-Tillman Water Control District Canal. Well, actually, that's the county's. That's the M1, isn't it, Mark? Yes, so that's the county's canal. The area is pretty wide. They have you've got South Drive, and then you've got this area that's actually, pretty wide for the canal. And it's hard to see, but sort of the shaded area on that screen, that's part of the canal. But
I was just curious why we didn't just annex the whole thing.
that's why they don't
Got
own
it.
the property all the way up to South Drive.
And I have a question about the sewer. I know they don't know how old it is, but once that goes, are they going to replace it? Do they have the right to replace it with another septic? I'm sorry, septic, I meant. Another septic, or they automatically have to tie into our system?
Now, what happens, and it happens several times, while Keith Mills was deputy city manager, the Department of Health would reach out to him if they had a septic system where they knew, because remember, the Department of Health is hooked up to the Department of Environmental Protection. They know where our water and sewer lines are. They would reach out to him, with the business and say, their septic system is failing. Would this meet your code for hooking up to sewer? And in this case, they would, because our distances, if you're less than 500 feet, which they would be, then they have to hook up to our sewer. So that would be the answer, and then the Department of Health would make those folks, work with us. And there's a process, from what I was looking at in the statutes in the Florida Administrative Code, there's sort of a process for them to abandon, they call it abandoning that septic system, and that would start that process.
All right, good. And the second question, if this was not an existing property, I know the county would want the owner to abort the driveway on Wickham and just have the one on Pinecrest, just trying to keep people from backing in and all those things. So do you plan on using both driveways, or what's the...
Mr. Corella, come up to the podium.
You state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Tom Corella, and I'm the owner of 1340 South Wickham Road. Thanks for having me tonight.
Certainly.
So the reason why that is the way it is because it is tough.
I'm sorry.
The reason why it's hard, reason why that is like that, because it's hard to go on to Wickham, and it's equally as hard to pull into there from Wickham. Because it's just, so what we were trying to do was make it, the entrance be on Pinecrest and exit onto Wickham, rather than trying to swing in there, because that's a very narrow driveway. It's like, I probably would say it's 10 foot. And the existing curb of Wickham Road, unless we change that and did a different construction to make that wider, you can't, it's easier to go out than it is to come in. So that was the plan, was to come in, they would get their plans, whatever they wanted, and then go out the other way. Okay. So unless somebody has a better idea, I would be more than happy to do something different. So that was my best, working with them, with the county, was like, that was like the best loop we could figure out how to do that. So,
all right.
I'll take suggestions.
I'm sure if you do anything with the county, you would have to go through them to change that driveway, I would think. But
so would it be with, would it be with you or with them?
It's still a county road, so
Yeah.
anything you do to Wickham Road, you've got to go through the county.
And Pinecrest is whose road?
It's also a county road.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes, right.
So the right of way is theirs. Gotcha.
Right. Very good. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Have anything else for him?
That's all I have.
I did address that that piece of property that is over there. If you go, I hear you asking her about that. So that's a right of way that goes all the way back. If you see the subdivision in a bigger picture, I was asking those questions at the zoning hearing. And I noticed that the other properties, I guess it splits a subdivision 4 houses back, or 4 properties back. And I was like, why can't we annex that part? Because it's been, all the rest of them go all the way to the canal and mine doesn't. And why doesn't it? So I guess I asked them to find out whose property it was, so I guess it's county. So I'm going to try to ask them for it or buy it off of them. So,
Very good. All right.
Yeah, we can't really speak towards why, as Mr. Carilla says, 4 lots have the county, it's actually property, it's not just right away. That's right next to them. And then the remainder on that block of Pinecrest Stone has something to do with the M1 canal, and it's, entirely up to them what they want to do with it. The city has no control over that.
It's probably worth pursuing.
yeah, there's buildings on it going all the way back, like sheds and stuff like that from other houses, and it's just like they haven't used it or took care of it in a very, very long time, so.
All right, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, I'm going to load up the presentation for items B and C, and we're going to present them together and, entertain any questions. The same owner of the property, but we do ask that you make your motions independently of the 2 ordinances. Because there's a rezoning component, we show this slide, and this is for you all or the Planning and Zoning Board. We show it to them also to disclose anything that, might be relevant towards communication with the applicant. So if you all have done anything, I think this is the time. I believe, Mr. Reppinger, is there anything you want to add to this slide?
I think it covers it.
Is there any disclosures from any of the council people? No, I think we're all good.
It's the same background, and what I wanted to go over is that it is a very small property. It's less than an acre, folks, which isn't very much for a commercial property, 0.83. And the existing future land use that they have in the county now is something called neighborhood commercial, and that was assigned in 1995. In the city, the closest thing, we don't have a neighborhood commercial land use designation. We have a commercial. In the county, they have a zoning that's called restricted neighborhood retail commercial, which in my mind is kind of a misnomer, but we'll get into that. And then our zoning, the closest thing would be commercial Wickham. We talked about, the use, and I've gone over that in the staff report.
That's a dollar.
And, we've shown some of the photos and whatnot, but I did want to, point out that since there's residential to the west, that there is a fence. That's that photo that is labeled with that existing 8-foot-tall fence along west property line. So there already is a fence. It's not something that we're going to have to follow up with this property owner about. This image will show you that in the county, it has shown in white, that designation of neighborhood commercial on the right-hand side of the slide. When it comes into the city, that's not supposed to say LD Res, it's commercial. And then we always look at sort of compatibility. That's what this table is about, is, you have quite a bit of commercial uses on 3 sides of this property, except to the west, which is that residential 6, future land use, but none of that has changed. None of that has changed from whenever, that house was converted to be commercial. And then with the future land use designation, this is actually sort of more restrictive in the county than their zoning is. Their zoning is more permissive. In the county, their land use designation only allows them to have convenience stores. But in the county zoning, they could have all kinds of retail. So there's a mismatch. So I could see how, it'd be a little bit problematic to run a business on this property. The city's, commercial designation doesn't allow institutional uses, which is allowed in neighborhood commercial in the county. So again, there's not an exact, apple to apple, but that's okay because, we have, the county, remember, spreads its future land use all across the county. We're just concentrated on West Melbourne and what fits for us. We always do our comprehensive plan review. And part of that we have in the red bullets is we did, of course, anticipating that this might hook up to sewer. Do we have sewer capacity for this type of small business? The answer is yes. Second bullet that's red is me letting you all know that, we tried to contact Department of Health. If you need to, talk to Mr. Corella a little bit about his knowledge of the septic system, you can, but we didn't receive any response. So then I started just sort of researching on my own about the septic system. And that's why I put that third bullet. Our code will require a sewer connection when the on-site septic system fails. And really, in terms of maximum impacts, which is something we've got to look at from the comprehensive plan, they have slightly less building that they could build if this was a complete greenfield and had no building on it. But as we know, it already has a use on it, already has a building. There is, this photo is to show you that the mound in the front yard is the current septic system. All right, and then we, of course, look at the city's adopted future land use goals, objectives, and policies. We make sure we put this in the staff report, and it basically talks about, is this the right type of designation for this property? And our analysis is that, yes, it is. We also have a new element in the comprehensive plan about property rights, that we can't, by our decisions, just take somebody's property and not have them be able to use the property. And so we don't, this is abiding with that portion of the Florida statutes also. And that brings us then into the rezoning request. So now we're looking at, again, the zoning in the county. In the left-hand side of the screen, it says BU1A. On the right-hand side of the screen, the closest thing that would match the pink that we have around it on the screen is that commercial Wickham. And it's the same sort of analysis. We have commercial Wickham on 3 sides, and the house that's to their west is on their west side. We did determine it's consistent with our land development regulations, and that this zoning district would allow, their landscape and it's called hardscape for the hard structures that would be outside, but the outdoor living use. We don't normally go into much of this in the staff report or into the slides, but the reason why, I put this is, again, to highlight, that's that column that says Brevard County BU1A, and you look at retail and you look at the laundry list of all the items that the county allows, yet the future land use says, nope, wait a minute, you can just have convenience store. So I don't know why they never changed it to match, other than they were really trying to be restrictive on this property. But I'm happy to say in our case that the zoning and the future land use designation would match. We wouldn't have that issue. The Planning and Zoning Board, as your local planning advisory board, did hear this last week, and they did have the recommendations to approve both items. So we wanted to make sure you knew that. And then their recommendation was to approve the first reading of both ordinances. So the first one is that ordinance number 2022-22, and that would be one motion. Then the second motion, if you agree to it, would be to approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-23. And if I could have the city attorney read the title paragraphs of those ordinances, please.
Ordinance number 2022-22, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, amending the future land use map of the comprehensive plan to change the future land use map for a parcel of land 0.83 acres located at 1340 South Wickham Road, as more fully described herein, from Brevard County NC Neighborhood Commercial to City of West Melbourne COM Commercial, providing an effective date. Ordinance number 2022-23, an ordinance of the City of West Melbourne, Brevard County, Florida, rezoning a parcel of land 0.83 acres located at 1340 South Wickham Road from Brevard County BU1A Neighborhood Retail Commercial to City of West Melbourne C-W Commercial Wickham, providing an effective date.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Does anyone from the public wish to speak on either one of these two ordinances? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Bentley?
We're going to do 22 first.
Yes.
Then I'd make a motion that we approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-22 to change the future land use from Brevard County NC to City of West Melbourne Commercial.
Thank you. Mr. Frampus?
Move to second.
Very good. Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Now 2022-23. Do we have a motion? Deputy Mayor Young?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make the motion to hold a public hearing and approve the first reading of ordinance number 2022-23, rezoning a .83 acre property at 1343 South Wickham Road in Brevard County Restricted Neighborhood Retail Commercial.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. I want to see a lot of green there. Green thumb. All right. Our next public hearing is revision to off-street parking standards.
Okay, this is not one that was submitted by an applicant. This is staff initiated, and this does have to do with some of the parking codes that are, applicable, and we'll get into some of the areas that this impacts. The last time that we did touch the parking standards was in 2009. That's why we listed the ordinance. And then, Exhibit A, which is attached to the current ordinance that's in your packet, would revise some of those regulations, but really only related to use and parking ratios. We always take a look at some of our neighbors, so that's at a third or second bullet, and then we include some of that comparison in Table 1. So these are some of the sections that changed. This is just something that, eventually would get into Muni Code, but we have that. If this is approved, then it would be listed as an uncodified ordinance until it's actually put into the Muni Code version. But I wanted to highlight, since we had a question last time, what did not change. So the parking space width, there's nothing really that we needed to do with that. That stays the same. So it's either the 11-foot wide or 10 foot. So for example, like industrial automatically gets to have a 10-foot wide space, and so does the multifamily and single family. But everything else should be 11-foot, or it should be something that if it's 10 foot, they don't have excessive parking.
Some of that we're not picking up on your mic, so.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Some of it, but when you're turning, people at home aren't hearing it. Yeah.
Have to follow along. So the offloading spaces for, trucks and whatnot to deliver, those stay the same. And then there's, I think there's like 34 parking ratios of what different uses have to have for quantity of parking. Many of those, the bulk of that stays the same. We're not touching those. And that's why I say, in that bullet, that we're not touching the residential parking requirements. This has nothing to do with whether you're single family or an apartment or, townhouse or condominium. We're not touching that. That's not something that's come up recently. But what staff did is we are bringing to you all in this code amendment some of the items that we have sort of wrestled with, that we think there could be some improvements. And that's what this represents. So this first one has to do with this is sort of a cross-referencing cleanup to Chapter 71, which is the landscape code. And we used to reference the Chapter 94, where Chapter 94 doesn't exist. It's Chapter 71. So that's what, some of this does, is make sure that we're not, doing things that really contradict another part of the code. And then in this section here, this is also sort of a cleanup that we allow, the parking stalls. What we think would work better is if we allow, parking to overhang onto landscape areas, then that they could be shortened to 17 feet instead of 18 feet, because we say they can overhang by 3 feet. So technically, there's a 3-foot area that they still have, hanging over the curb line, because we don't allow wheel stops. So it'd be hanging over the curb line before they get to
You don't allow what?
So, I'm sorry?
You said we don't allow something?
Wheel stops. So wheel stops are the triangular things with the rebar pins that tie them into. We don't allow that. Yes, you see some still around town. That's usually the older businesses. I don't know at what year that got changed. All I know is ever since I've been here in 2007, that's what the code has said, is that wheel stops are not allowed. So any of the new businesses that you see come in, they have raised curb. They'll either have raised curb, or they'll have a wall, or they'll have bollards. So you'll see a lot of the convenience stores have the bollards. You understand what those are? Okay, so they'll have those instead of the wheel stops. All right, and then really the meat of the matter for us was changing some of the requirements for the parking ratio for how many parking spaces are needed. So for example, car wash, and I want to let you know that car wash is not a big deal to us. That it's just something that we've had a couple of them come in. We don't have a standard for it. We've used sort of what we thought, was an approximate standard, and we can do that. But we saw that, our sister city, Melbourne, did have a standard for car wash. We borrowed from that. Again, your local planning agency, Planning and Zoning Board, has some discussion on that. That's in the staff report, and they thought we should tweak it a little bit. That's what we brought forward to you all, but we can certainly talk about it. Entertainment center, we've really only had a few proposals to have something like a Dave and Brewster's. We do have, now a banquet center, Springer Garden, and we really don't have a code for that. We don't have something that says if you're a banquet hall, this is how many parking spaces you need. So that's why we thought, if that's sort of the movement that the city's going in, maybe we should have one. It would make it easier for staff and the applicants, so for both sides. And then mixed use. So the Space Coast Town Center, is our one active one that we're aware of. And in the development agreement, we talk about their parking study and that they can reduce parking by up to 25%. And they did indeed produce a parking study, and they showed that with the multifamily, they could reduce by up to 18%. So, if we're going to sort of do it on that one case, and we have other properties that are zoned gateway interchange, we might as well have sort of a mixed-use ratio or methodology, which is what we're proposing, of how they should do that parking study for the mixed use. And then really for me, sort of the heart of it is the shopping centers. I think most of us, are aware of how shopping centers to us was a place where you shop for retail. But it's no longer that. Shopping centers, are morphing into different types of uses. You have restaurants. Some of them, will have sort of niche retail, whether it's comic strips or, whatever it might be. But they have other services, other, personal services. And so, we really, in talking to the Planning and Zoning Board, we don't have a shopping center ratio. All we have is a retail ratio or a restaurant ratio. So that means these little plazas, that might maybe have 10 units of inline stores, they originally got coded as being just, retail. Well, if they're not retail, and that's what some of the owners will say to us when they bring in, more than half of the spaces to be restaurant, they really don't want to be measured against the restaurant either. And a lot of cities, fixed that years ago by just having a shopping center ratio. So that's all that we're saying, is that, yes, you go and do what you need to do in your shopping center. We're not going to get into these small things of are you retail, are you restaurant? Because right now we are. Because right now that's how I have to implement the code. And so some of the shopping centers, we've had them do like mini studies. And so this would move us away from that, from having to tie up the owner's time and our staff time in kind of analyzing all this minutia. But the Planning and Zoning Board, rightfully realized that where we have the issues are in the smaller centers. The bigger centers, when I say big centers, let me clarify, in my world what I mean. I mean the size of Publix's, and yes, there's a table in here. The size of Publix, so you're talking about 20 acres, or more in terms of larger shopping centers. They don't have a parking issue, folks. They've got to see a parking. But it's the small ones that are less than 70,000 square feet where when we start to get into that minutia of, how much retail and how much restaurant and how much, entertainment, that's where you bump into some of that of, either they're going to have to restripe and redo islands or add more parking, or they're going to have to figure out how they do the timing of the parking so that people aren't on top of each other. And we've had to do that. We've had to have lots of discussions with some of the small ones. And that's where, if we go with a shopping center ratio of one space for every 275 feet, for the most part, that solves that. And we don't have to, put these smaller, what I call smaller, when there's less than 70,000 square feet of floor area. We don't have to put them through that motion. So that's what I think would work. And that if we keep to sort of the retail rate, that for every shopping center that is over 70,001 square feet, then they just keep that one space for 300, because like I said, the Publixes and all these bigger centers, they don't have a parking issue. No matter what they do in terms of their mix of uses, there's not a parking issue. And then, you know, if nothing else, there's always a possibility for a shared parking study between, you know, businesses that may overlap with their driveways and share parking between them, you know, that are distinct. So that's still always a possibility. And then the thing with the theaters, I guess at one time there was, and the mayor, I think you may know of, that there was going to be a theater that was going to be in with a shopping center. And I know years ago Metro West actually did have, and maybe this code was created for that. But you don't really see that model, so we just sort of changed it from having a reference to, if you're in a shopping center, this is your ratio, and we just said, look, if you're less than this size, this is your ratio of how many parking spaces. If you're greater than this size, then it's this ratio. So like I said, this is really the bulk of what staff is trying to, you know, move forward. I understand it's a lot, and if you all need some more clarification, I'll try to, you know, answer what you have. The last one is car washes. And this is the one that I said, you know, the Planning and Zoning Board, you had some, you know, discussion on. I wanted to give you some examples of the types of, you know, different ones. So the gas station one we're all familiar with. Automated, when we talk about that, that would be like a Bill's Car Wash, some of the newer ones like Dirty Dogs and some of the other brands like that. You know, and I did have a discussion with the mayor about the highest shift and what that means. And just to let you all know that, you know, this isn't the only category where we rely on sort of the honor system with, you know, whoever the developer is as to what their highest shift is. And I don't think it's really an issue. I mean, we do that with industrial. That's what I let the mayor know, is that we also have a similar ratio. Of course, it's a different, you know, number for what they're doing, but it entails whatever their highest shift is. And with the industrial, we really haven't had that issue, you know, with that honor system. But if that's something that you all want us to look at, we certainly can. But remember, the automated is not one of those where people are going to be there for hours and hours. So it's different than some of the others, and that's why we felt that we really, the only ones who are going to be there for a long time are going to be the employees, and that's really the only category that we thought we had to cover. The self-serve are, you know, you have very few of those, and in fact, in town, the one that we have is called My Car Wash, you know, and has 3 bays, 3 vacuums, and 1 employee. So in this new code, that would equate to 7 spaces. Okay, so those are, you know, some of the ratios that we're talking about. The entertainment center, the last bullet, you know, is where we think what other local governments have done of sort of this mix of, you know, 1 for every 3 seats and 1 parking space per employee plus 1 space of 100 square feet of accessory use would give you, you know, what you need for that banquet facility. And the reason why I like that, you know, 1 per 100 square feet of accessory use is, believe it or not, the one banquet hall that we have talked about having a batting cage in there. You know, so that would be the example of the accessory use. Or if they decided to have something else to occupy the children while the adults are, you know, at the banquet facility. So, like I said, those are sort of the thrust of the big changes, and then the mixed use. And what we did is, there's an organization called Urban Land Institute. They have a very thorough sort of methodology and what they think needs to be the data in a parking study, and I agree with it. So those are the items with those little arrows. I think that would help to define what that parking study would look like for mixed use. And then, you know, we would determine whether we think that they've captured the right data, or if we need a little bit more data or clarification. And then I have the bullet that, you know, what we're doing is, you know, to give you assurance, we're not saying that the mixed use, if they do a parking study, they get to do away with half of the parking. No, maybe, you know, a quarter, but certainly not half. So there is a cap. There is sort of a, you know, protection barrier with that one. And that's where I gave the example that the Space Coast Town Center, they only reduced by 18%. Mr. McDowell, Councilmember McDowell was showing this table that we have in there. I'm not going to go in depth, but there is a table where, one of my planners did a lot of, digging about what the square footages were of the different shopping centers. So you have that data. The theaters we talked about, and then the Planning and Zoning Board recommendation, that we did summarize that in your staff report. And it had to do, like I said, with actually having a division between the small and big shopping centers. They had their opinion about the car washes. And then about the movie theaters, they actually thought that we didn't need to require as much parking, that we could require a little bit less parking. And so that's what that third bullet is about. And the last one was just sort of a cleanup about being consistent and having the city manager. It's usually in the text of the different documents, the codes. The city manager is the one who's allowed to designate whoever's going to implement the code. So that's all that was a cleanup. But they said if those changes are made, then they recommended approving the first reading of this ordinance, revising the city's parking standards. So that's my presentation. I'll try to answer questions you might have.
This is a public hearing. Does anybody from the public wish to address City Council? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Frampus?
Thank you, Mayor. I have 3 questions, and I'll start off with the car wash. And I'll use Bill's Car Wash as an example, as you did. Can we, in the automated section, can we put some kind of disclaimer that the vacuum and pre-wash bays are not included in the parking count?
We certainly can. I guess I'm...
Because when I go through Bill's Car Wash, I see all their employees' cars parked on the concrete apron or median there, and they don't have enough parking spaces.
Right, that's exactly.
So if you count their bays for their pre-wash and their vacuum bays, they would have plenty, I'm assuming. But we would allow them to account them in this scenario, correct?
We would, but you're right. We could say, because like I said, what we're really trying to accommodate are the employees.
Correct.
And not have them park in places they shouldn't, in grass and in the right-of-way and places like that. I think probably if I sort of craft that with the city attorney or the new city attorney's help, we could do something like that.
I'd like to see something like that in there, because maybe we could eliminate that problem. You got nightclubs scratched out. Is that replaced somewhere else?
No, it's not replaced. It's in the zoning code. We no longer allow nightclubs. And this reference here in the parking code was for when we did have nightclubs and what kind of parking they would have to provide.
So when Space Coast Town Center weren't they looking at putting some kind of evening club or something out there at one time?
Not allowed to. It's
No
prohibited.
entertainment center?
In the Gateway Interchange, it's not allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And to move with the theaters from 3 to 6 and 8, it seems a lot.
Okay.
Most vehicles don't hold 6 or 8 people, and I don't know. It just seems like a lot to me. I was wondering where you came up with those numbers, and if in fact we do change it, and could those theaters come back and redevelop their parking lot with the extra spaces they have?
They could. In terms of where we had gotten that from, it really...
Just seems like a significant change.
Brevard County, and I'm trying to think of examples in Brevard County. I guess what was their rave theater is AMC up in Viera. That would be an example of that ratio, that 1 to 3, 1 space for every 3 seats of parking of a theater. That's the closest one that I can think of that's in the county, unless you go up.
You said 1 to 3?
Yeah. And that's where we got that ratio from.
But we're moving from
You're
1
right.
1 to 6 and 1
right,
to
you're
8,
right.
correct?
You're right. Yeah, that was discussion with the Planning and Zoning Board, and
So it's an arbitrary number, just we picked it out of the sky?
I don't know that it was completely arbitrary, but what their aim is that a lot of them are aware of how much unused parking there are with those theaters and how they basically sublease, to churches and other types of uses on weekends anyways, and allow them to use those spaces that aren't. So when you
It's my
say
hope that
redevelop-
theaters come back into popularity, so so I was just
Yeah,
seemed like an awful lot to me.
It's not a burning thing for staff. We put it in there mostly to clarify that you really don't have what we had years ago with the Metro West and having, a little theater tucked in a shopping center. We may get some of that, but then it would just, apply with the regular parking ratio, whether it's less than 70,000 square feet or greater than.
I don't know if anybody else cares about it, but I just wanted to point it out. It just seemed like a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDowell? I'm sorry, Ms. Adams, then Mr. McDowell. Sorry.
A couple things. First of all, I attended the Planning and Zoning meeting where this was discussed. I think that board did a great job of trying to hash this out. And I bring that up because it seemed like through the discussion, there was a going back and forth of how much parking is needed now versus how much parking was needed in the past. I just thought it was worth noting. I think now, compared to years ago, we have a lot more people that are doing quicker park and pickup for items or online shopping that, especially at certain stores, just the parking isn't as needed. With that being said, I had a couple notes that I did want to ask about. Through the count, there were 9 of the less than 70,000 square feet, 5 of the larger than in the table that was provided. When we're looking at this, are the smaller shopping centers that are included, are they required or encouraged to change to code if we change this tonight, or are they then grandfathered in and get to make that decision? Because I don't want to put extra burden on those smaller businesses if we're changing that code.
Right, and I wanted to point out to our attorney that we do have what I call sort of a savings clause, and I need to find it in here. So on the bottom of page 5D15, there is that savings clause, and I'll read it out into the record. So I say, any development constructed in compliance with the related parking requirements prior to the effective date of the ordinance will be deemed conforming. Does that work? Okay.
Okay. If we're encouraging these smaller businesses that may need parking, they then have that opportunity, but they're not required to.
Right.
Okay. In terms of the parking, I noticed that a lot of the bigger shopping centers already have more than what we would be requiring for their parking ratio. Do we have a maximum capacity of parking, or are they just allowed to designate that themselves?
No, we don't, and that certainly is something we can do. And folks, to be honest, I've been a planner for many years. The emphasis now in planning is to get away from minimum parking ratios and to sort of have the maximums, but a lot of that is in very urban settings. And we're still suburban. We're not really an urban setting. We don't have a downtown Miami. We're not a downtown Tampa and those types of things. But there is some validity, and it's something that planners struggle with in that, certainly like you said, everybody, can relate to the quick drop off and pick up, and you don't really have somebody who's there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. There's also the notion that at some point we may have more autonomous vehicles, or you may have fewer people driving, zip cars and other types of things, that where the car's not really going to be stationed there. It's just going to be dropping the folks off. That's a hard thing to sort of put into the parking thing. So for now, I'm just sort of keeping the status quo, but I'm certainly open to, if council wants us to look at a maximum, realize that the big shopping centers that are over 70,000 square feet, they typically will, when land was a little bit cheaper, they would park for their maximum use day, which is either Thanksgiving or Black Friday or something like that. So that's what they would park for, even though they don't need it. And you saw what happened with the Melbourne Square Mall, that with all that parking up front, they converted it into 3 businesses because they had so much excess.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking of. Some of these larger businesses that I see, there's always parking, no matter what time you go, how often you go. And so in terms of that, I know our city is going to continue to grow, so we're going to have that need, but I also don't want our city to become a sea of parking lots either. So I don't know what the wishes of council are with that maximum. I just think it's something we should be thinking about in the future.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to understand that table, and I've seen the current code, and I think what, if I heard you correctly, is that the way we calculated it was all contingent on who was there, how much, and all that. So the 1 to 300 ratio, because it's not consistent. It's actually going in two different directions. When you look at the ratio of 1 to 275, 1 to 250, and 1 to 200, those numbers go up, but yet 1 to 300 goes down. And so it wouldn't seem to be logical for what we currently have. So it has to be because it was configured. So I do think it makes sense to change the process. In that same vein that Council Member Adams is saying is, what do you do with the space? You know, you're going to end up having quite a bit of additional space. I saw out of this list, everyone is basically well over the threshold and not a problem, and there seems to be lots of extra parking spaces in here. So the question is going to be, what's the plan? What are we putting more trees up? Is that the idea? Or have we not kind of thought?
No, we haven't approached these businesses that exist that have, you know, excess of the 1 to 300 and asked them to plant any more trees. What happens is, when they do redevelop, you know, whether it's the little Aldi's going in or the Publix, or what used to be the purple Publix, but now it's not, it's Windover Square. When they redeveloped, we made sure that they had, you know, today's code compliant number of islands and trees. So it's going to be, you know, piecemeal at best.
To be
with
continued.
redevelopment.
Yeah. What about the two that are not going to be in compliance? Are we going to grandfather those in for
Yes.
those 10 spaces? Okay.
And that's why I read that statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's called a savings clause.
Savings. Okay. And it looks like there was only one at Palm Bay Corners. And is this comprehensive? Is this entire, all the shopping?
It should be.
Okay, so there's no others that we have to worry about somebody calling and saying, hey.
No, but something, I will say that something that might have had like 3 units we didn't include because it doesn't meet the definition of shopping center. So if you drive around and you're like, well, they didn't include this one that has 2 units, it has to have 5 units or more, and then we included it in the study.
You don't have Lowe's in here. That's a shopping center now.
You're right. I guess I should say 5 inline stores.
I was just going to ask that question. No.
Sorry.
Well, I wanted to know about the Palm Bay Corners because that's actually low. Mm-hmm. That's the only one that was actually lower. And did you have any background on that, what occurred? Because all the other ones are up as far as the 1 to 275 ratio. You follow what I'm saying?
Well, it makes sense because at the current code, they were required when they were initially built to have 62 parking spaces. But instead, they built an excess of 91 parking spaces. And then if you go to one for 275 square feet, oh, you're saying the math is wrong.
Right.
Yeah, the math probably needs to be, that. You're absolutely correct. That is a typo.
All right.
And we will correct that for the second time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Young.
Thank you, Mayor. Have we taken into consideration how long some of these people are parked in these spaces, such as right now, it takes about 3 hours to charge a car from start to finish, depending on if you're traveling and you need to charge it. And you might be in a movie 3 hours, yet you might go in to pick up flowers in a store and be in there 5 minutes. And also some of these retail spaces have churches, so they're only going to have people in them mainly, the most use would be on the weekends, maybe on a Sunday morning. Other businesses are not even open at that same time. Restaurants, again, some people are going to be in there depending on the kind of restaurant it is. And all that timing has been taken into consideration?
No,
No.
we can't do that. With these types of ratios, we can't do that. The only way you can really get to that is with parking studies, and that would be one of those factors to, have a parking study. And I can tell you with shopping centers, those center owners would rather just have a straight ratio than have to go into the minutia of, this is our business model that we see for this use, for that use, and the other. So we can get into that kind of detail, but that's more like a parking study, and most of the owners aren't going to really want to do that for everything.
All right, so when we did Lowe's, I remember when we did Lowe's, and you can have a 10-foot spot if you have a bike rack. And you can have 11-foot spots if you don't have a bike rack. And I know that we had them put all that parking in, and then I think they had to restripe at one point when they redid it. They had to restripe again. So if we required all this additional parking lot, and now we're going to require less or fewer spots, then they are free to go ahead and build out, as we saw, like with the mall, put restaurants and things in. They could do that at Lowe's as well, as long as they keep the minimum that's required.
That's right.
Have put other stores in there. I know at one point they had only at the Christmas time, or at the holiday season, they only had the trees out, and they took up a lot of their parking that way. Now they've changed that completely over there to where it's permanent.
Right.
So all of this is, well, other than what you just said wasn't, all this is in this, well, I don't see Walmart. Walmart will have motorhomes parked in there. Maybe I'm just not on the right page. I'm at the bottom of page 5D5, and it's motorhomes and fire trucks. I see Palm Bay.
Yeah, but again,
shopping center.
and the mayor brings up a good point. I mean, I'll specify that when we talk about the shopping centers, we're talking about 5 inline lines.
Okay, so that's just the one store. That's why it's
just
not.
like you don't see Sam's in here. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Sam's doesn't have 2 or 3 stores on either side of it.
Okay, thank you.
So you're absolutely correct. We didn't do anything with the ratios or, any of the wording about the bicycle racks. This doesn't touch that. That's why I say most of the code we didn't change. It was really only things that we have encountered as sort of problematic over the years.
Mr. Bentley? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I like it the way it was, but I understand what you're trying to do. To me, it's really dependent upon the location as to what some places are just more popular and have a lot more cars. And that kind of makes it tough. I know, and I realize this is in Melbourne, one of the examples I'll give, but if you look at Washies in Melbourne, just down there, it's hard to park there very often.
Okay.
They don't have, it's a small strip,
Right.
With 2 or 3, maybe 4 businesses, and it's just hard to park. I wouldn't want to make that any worse or allow them to do any additional building. I've actually seen Metro right here where it's been full several times. Actually seen Publix where it's full. I know you referenced that it's not too bad there. But there are many businesses like the theaters. I see lots of space all the time. I've never seen that full, for example. So, I don't know. I think we're giving a lot here, though. I would like to see our number. I'm okay with the numbers that you're using, for example, for the movie theaters or whatever. But I'd like to see these strip malls have a little more requirement than coming down as much as we are. It looks like you come down like 25%.
If you're talking about going from the 1 to 300 to the 1 to 275, then yeah.
That seems like a lot. And I'm afraid that you're just going to build more stuff there. So then it's going to just be harder for people to park because they're going to use that, like Lowe's is doing, they're going to use that space to put product.
Okay.
In certain cases, I think it's okay, but there's other cases where I've had a hard time parking in some of these places, or people I know do, and I don't want to make some of those or allow that to be made worse because of this new standard. And I see it particularly true in smaller strip malls, if that, what you call them, like a Wasie's. I call that still kind of a strip store sequence.
Right, and those would be the type that I would say are like less than 70,000 square feet. So that's why, the IHOP is the one at Palm Bay Corners. And then remember, it's not just IHOP. They've got, like you mentioned, maybe a restaurant that's more popular. They have a seafood station there. So they have a few. And you're right here at Metro West, because I've seen the popularity of some of the restaurants, and I know some of the hours of some of the restaurants. That's why I had them do a parking study. It took them 2 or 3 months to do it, folks. We wouldn't give a BTR until we had that satisfied. So we can continue to do that. I mean, I hear that you say you like the way things are, and we'll continue doing that, or we can just sort of come up with a ratio and actually, with that, let's go to Shops of West Melbourne, because that's a bigger one. That's more than 70,000 square feet. That's Bed Bath & Beyond, and now it's got the Aldi's and all that. We're saying that the current parking ratio, we wouldn't change. So that would still be the one space for every 300. They would be required to have 540 spaces. They actually built more. This
That's
gets
where
to
the
council
Steak and
members.
Shake and all this?
Yes,
That always seems to have plenty of parking
right.
to me.
Okay, so that's one example.
Yeah.
I don't
You know,
think so.
and
Okay,
Not with
well-
all these there
The
anymore.
Wendover,
Well, the problem I have also is some of this stuff is only bad for about 3 months out of the year.
exactly.
And so when you hit November, where you've got Thanksgiving and then people getting in for Christmas and folks from up north coming down, it gets, I don't know, how do you justify forcing them to keep parking all year long for a 3-month period?
Exactly.
I don't know the right answer there.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. It really is, because that's why I said, that Shops of West Melbourne, they've got almost 200 spaces more than they have, but the Wendover shopping that we say the Publix here on US 192, they have maybe 100 more spaces. So it depends on how they built that center, how they themselves thought that they would use it, and yeah, local government's only going to be able to go so far, and hopefully they've made the right choices, but we know that we certainly have in terms of what has worked, historically across the U.S. and then around us, in other local governments.
So this, kind of the philosophy here is this is looking to help the business owner, not the people trying to park. I mean, you're making everything less parking spaces in almost every case. In many cases, I won't say in every case.
You're right.
So this is less friendly to people trying to park and more friendly to businesses. True?
If you say less friendly to people.
Because they can just build on that space that you took away. They don't have to put a tree there or anything else.
But remember, they still have to meet a parking ratio if they
Right.
build. So,
Yeah.
I know we said that, but it's not that they just get to build, a 3,000 square foot building and they have zero parking from that, not necessarily.
Right, but they're going to get more building now than they would have under the old rules.
They could, slightly more.
Well, look at Lowe's. They call it what you want, but they've taken away, 2 lanes of parking there and put Christmas trees there and everything else, depending on the time of year.
Right. Yeah, I can include those. Like I said, I did not include anything that's not in line, because those ratios are still the same in the city, but remember that I don't know if the county had the same sort of standard, and we took it in the way it was. And we made Wawa's come up with their own parking, and so they can adequately sit as standalone. And the same thing with the bank. So I wasn't really worried about that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll pipe in. I have a long list, but I think one of the things that we're all talking about is unintended consequences. If we shrink the parking, they want to get more on their land, and that could be an issue. I know we're not talking about apartment complexes and things like that, but same kind of thing. You shrink that, and they're going to want to put more on there. And businesses will be the same way. We require less parking, they can expand their footprint. So I don't think that's good. And just because 3 months is overcrowded, I think you got to account for that. It's like building a road. Well, 3 months, it's overcrowded. We want to account for the busiest time, not the leanest time, I think. Using the number of employees, I don't know that I like that per se, because that's such a fluctuating number. And I don't know that that's a good number. It's a number, but the base parking spaces on number of employees doesn't seem quite right to me. If you look at Winn-Dixie Shopping Center right here, you talk about a shopping center that's overcrowded in parking, and it's just a bad situation there. So, and I don't know, some of these numbers you've given us, they have added to these complexes, and I don't know if that's accounted to it. I mean, they added to the building.
Yes, that's accounted for.
That's accounted
why
for.
it took us so long in getting that table together.
Okay.
Believe me, Cindy Snade did a great job as a planner in going through all the site plans, everything new that was approved, adding it all up, so I have complete confidence in that.
Car washes, that's kind of a big one that if we look at our bills, not to pick on him, but both those, they're putting 10 pounds in a 7-pound lot, just not fitting either one of them, and there's no parking. And you also mentioned the ones that are self-serve and having one spot. I strongly disagree with that. I think you need a handicap spot. I think you need one for the...
That's the handicap spot is not what I'm talking about. As part of the ADA compliance, the building official makes sure that every business, when they get a CO, has to have at least one.
But you just said one parking spot in that self-serve car wash earlier.
No, this is the ratio, but what I'm saying is that there's always going to be a handicap space.
Okay.
Don't think that this does away with that requirement. So they get to choose. Let's say in this case, my car wash has 7 spaces. At least one of those has to be handicapped.
Then where's the public parking do we have one parking space for public?
For Publix?
For public parking.
At that same My Car Wash?
Yes.
I think they do in the back.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember, but they have, there are 3 vacuum stations, and then they have some additional striped areas in between them.
I would just say you need at least 3 parking spaces additional, one handicap, one for the person working in there cleaning up, and one for the public if they need it. But
If you all want us to go in that direction, when you make the motion, just include that. But like I said, car wash is not a burning one. We won't have a ratio.
And as far as the movie theater that we talked about here next to Sam's down that way, and I think it was around 2003 or so when we approved that. We did it less than code because, as you know, not every movie gets out at 8 o'clock. So that's probably the best example of a staggered kind of schedule that they could do it less.
I agree.
Movies. As far as on your thing, I forgot what you had with the ample theater. What was your ratio with ample theater? And number 2, would our city parking pass for our amphitheater?
Would our city pass? Are you talking about at the parks?
Yes.
No, because there is no ratio. Like I said, there's 28 ratios that I didn't touch.
Okay.
The parks one I didn't touch. The amphitheater doesn't stand alone. It's in the park. It's part of the park. There is no parking ratio for that. It's whatever you all as council deem is appropriate. So it has nothing to do with, what we're requiring of the rest of the businesses. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, there's no rules on that. Okay. Adjustments for, you said split transportation. Can you define that a little bit more?
Was that in one of the ratios or in my
In your report.
It might have been with the Urban Land Institute. Yeah, step 1, gather and review project data, research the modal split. Is that what you're talking about?
I'll find it. But
Yeah, I just want to make sure I answer your question.
no, I don't know if that you did answer the question, though. So if they can have less parking because it's has split transportation, what does that mean?
Well, the modal split has to do with do they have bus service or not. So is it the type of business that would have a lot of, bus deliveries in terms of, their employees going to that particular use? And we don't have too many of that. So that's probably not one that, factor that's really going to be used much in this gather and review project data for a mixed-use type of development.
You also you're talking a little bit about shared parking.
Shared parking, we do give a little bit of credit already. We're not changing that. So what shared parking means is, if we do have, 2 centers that are next to each other and they have a driveway that connects them, and we have a few of those in town, they get to reduce their parking by 10%, and that's not something that I'm changing on this. If they desire. It's not that we compel them to. If they want to, instead of having 100 spaces, they want to have, a little bit less, and they have an agreement that's codified in an easement agreement, a legal document that says that they will forever share that driveway, that they agree to share the parking, then yes, we allow some reduction.
But that Space Coast Town Center has their own unique rules over there?
Well, the shared parking would apply in that case. They just, with every new type of use, they have to do either a modification to the study that they already did, which was mostly for multifamily, or they need to comply with our code. So that's how we handle it.
And I think we have to be extremely careful with mixed use, reducing the parking spaces there. I mean, as it is, mixed use seems like, again, you're packing a lot into a small area. And to lessen the parking spaces, again, is not a good thing. So far, I think the only thing I'm seeing here pretty much is the car wash modifications and maybe less for the movie theater. But besides that, the rest of it's not really doing a whole lot for me. Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. I just was trying to figure out the magnitude of the current state is that they already have surplus according to the current code. And the new code, so they could do it now. They can take space now, right? And I'm trying to figure out the delta of the new code to see how much more space do they get out of this? Because they can do it now.
Are you talking about shopping centers?
Yes, in general. I mean, that's because most businesses really want to have adequate space for their parking. I mean, they don't want to go ahead and take spaces away from their customers. They want them to park there. So I do think that it's the larger complexes that are concerning, as to all of a sudden they put sheds up or they put Christmas trees in there or something like that. But even that, what's the delta of that? Is it this huge number that we have to be concerned by? And in no way do I want to play this down, because this is a complex thing.
It is.
It really is. It sounds like a lot of work has gone into this, and kudos to the staff for doing that. It's interesting. I'm just trying to figure out what's the magnitude of the issue.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly look at, some of the examples that you've given of, the centers that, and again, I'm not going to use things that truly aren't shopping centers, folks, but I'll use something like a Hammock Landing where they do have the tree sales and whatnot, and let this is how many parking spaces they need to have. During this time of year, they take away this many spaces. We'll give an example of another shopping center, and say, if they reduce by 50 parking spaces, they could have another addition of whatever square footage. We can go in that direction, but that's going to take us a little more time to get back to you with second reading.
It doesn't seem like we're quite ready, but I want to comment on Hammock Landing. Do we still have the terrible rule where they can not pave their whole parking lot and use that?
It's not a city rule. Please don't misunderstand that that's a city rule. And it wasn't that they were paved. So let me just slightly bring you back so that for the record it's clear to everyone. That's what's called a development of regional impact. And it's not just the city that enforced what they did with their buildings. It was other agencies. Might have been 10 other state agencies. We weren't the only player. Now, we get the joy of sort of enforcing this after it's all said and done. But in the beginning, what happens with a development of regional impact is all of these agencies that a developer normally would deal with more towards the backside of permitting and whatnot, they deal with up front. Remember, Hammock Landing is also the development that was required to do all those ramp requirements. They had to straighten out Culver Drive. They had to put in another signal over by Athens Drive, put in some sidewalks on Athens Drive on the Palm Bay side, not even in West Melbourne side. That all had to do with FDOT, City of Palm Bay getting to put their 2 cents, City of Melbourne getting to put their 2 cents, all up front.
Yeah.
So the agency that I'm leading up to is St. John's. And St. John's put their 2 cents in, and they said 10% of your pavement will be pervious. That's not a City of West Melbourne requirement, and I hate that it's in there. That's why I get defensive, because it is not a City of West Melbourne requirement. It was a St. John's requirement. We are stuck with it. We live with it. The developer can try to sort of overturn it, but that's baked in, actually the wording and stuff in that development order that got passed for that.
But unfortunately,
Long and short of that.
unfortunately, the owner of that is not keeping it up, and it looks really
They're not.
terrible, terrible, yeah.
And I don't think St. John's Care said they're keeping it up or not.
Well, I understand. So,
That's some of the areas where they are thinking about converting to electric vehicle charging. And then that's when we say to them that if you do that, it will be regular asphalt pavement or concrete, whatever choice you want to make. But yeah, we have, like you said, some examples of that on both the west side of Norfolk Parkway and on the east side. And so the newest one on the east side, that's absolutely what we're going to do. It's in an area where they have that pervious, that crumbly, asphalty stuff. And then we would have them do their choice of either concrete or solid pavement.
okay, well, it's not a good thing, whatever it is, but.
I agree.
Mr. Bentley?
You got me off on a tangent there. Can't we force them to maintain that impervious area?
We can certainly, I'll get with the city manager and we'd have to talk to our attorney about how we get them to do that. And if we,
I mean, they have a special tax allowed to keep that place up,
it's
right?
not a tax.
Whatever you want to call it.
Tax doesn't come to the
Assessment,
city.
whatever
User
you want to
fee.
put on
They
it.
do.
They
You're
get money to
absolutely
keep
right.
that area up.
Just like a Barefoot Bay or a Viera, you know, they have that special community development district and the mayor is aware of that, absolutely. And that's in place for 100 years. So,
99, but that's okay.
yeah, 99 is close enough to
We
100.
can look into seeing if we can get that maintained better. Thank you.
Okay. So, I think it probably needs to go back to the drawing board. Not that you need to start from ground zero, because I know you did a lot of good work, a lot of studying, but some of that's just not resonating with council. So, you said you had more stuff to look into and bring back as well.
It's up to you all whether you want to make a motion on this, up, down, postpone. We do have an ordinance put together, so I do need some sort of motion.
Ms. Adams?
So if we vote to postpone involving the discussion that's happened here on council tonight, would this have to go back to Planning and Zoning Board for the next time they meet, or would it just come back to council?
No, it would just come back unless the attorney thinks something different, but typically we haven't done that.
Unless you're going to make some real substantive change to the ordinance that goes beyond the scope of what P&Z looked at. You're just talking about what the parking requirements are. So they saw it, they gave their comments on it. It's still addressing parking. So I think you could continue this item without having to send it back to P&Z.
Okay.
Unless you wanted to,
Mr. Fram?
not to make things more difficult.
We could move forward with approving the first reading, and then she can bring changes, planning can bring changes back, and if they don't meet our, are we not clear enough on what we want, or?
We got some substantial changes, so I don't think that would be good. Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, I would just make a motion.
Your mic's not on.
No.
Your mic's not on.
It is now. I'd make a motion that we put this off and get more of the information that's been alluded to tonight. I'd rather do that than try to put it through first reading and then make substantial changes and hope they get implemented before second reading. So I don't want to go that route. I'd rather stop it now and get it made the way that everybody wants it, or much more in fashion.
Ms. Adams?
I second the postponement.
And I'm just not a big fan of it.
Do we need a date certain, or do we need to, when staff has it?
Yeah.
Did we advertise this for first reading?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you don't want to, I don't know how you typically do it, but my understanding would be, or my expectation would be, that if you don't want to re-advertise, that you would have to do it to a time certain. If you don't, you're probably going to have to re-advertise.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with re-advertising. It's not, just so that you all know, like a comprehensive plan is expensive to advertise. This is not. So I don't have an issue with not having a date certain, because the closest date would be maybe 3 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would just do January, maybe the second meeting in January, and is that?
Know that I'll have it ready by January.
Oh, okay. So I thought that was about 3 months. All right, so what month would you rather me delay it to? March?
Yeah.
All right, so included as part of my motion, sometime whenever one of our meetings in March is. So that would be the date certain, so that shouldn't have to re-advertise it. Or do you want to do
You want
something?
the first or second meeting?
Second.
Second meeting in March 2023. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that, Ms. Adams?
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay.
Do you think that's enough time?
If not, we can,
We can do it again.
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. The only hesitancy I have on this is the words substantial or material, or do you feel confident you understand what the questions are? That you can answer them so we don't wait 3, 4, 5 months to get back to where we're at today again?
We may have to have a workshop as I kind of think through some of what you all are asking, so just let me digest on that a little bit.
Okay, that would be my only hesitancy, is that we're just delaying a inevitable, we still can't make a decision on this. Okay, thank you.
Christie, would it be better for you as if the motion was just you bring it back to us at your, because it's not that expensive, as you said.
Right.
Would you rather just bring it back to us when you're ready and not have the pressure of, I got to have this ready by March?
Yes.
All right, so I'll do that.
I'll withdraw my second.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't your second, but I'll support that.
Do what?
I was going to do the second when you jumped in. Okay. It's all right. He withdrew his first. Second doesn't even matter. Okay. Mr. Bentley, anything else?
So my motion is we do what she's suggesting and bring it back when she wants to, not when we want to.
Mr. Ditmore?
We're withdrawing.
So there's not a motion there, so what are we, I was going to make a motion, that's not really a motion, so what is your motion? Are you motioning to decline this at this time?
His motion
Or
was-
which,
Go ahead, your motion.
Yeah, I'm declining it at this time.
okay. Then-
I want her to decide when and if she wants to bring it back.
Okay,
Yes. All right, I'm withdrawing that motion.
well,
He dropped his motion, so
you're dropping your motion, okay. All right, you're dropping your motion. Okay, all right, I'm going to make a motion that we, you're done, right? So,
Well, I was
I'll-
making a motion that we do it at her pleasure.
when staff,
But I
he's
would
saying
say
when
the
staff is ready, they'll bring it back to us.
Yes.
That's his motion.
just decline it, I mean, we're not going to move forward, we're not going to, just bring it back later.
I'll second your motion, by the way.
I'm not really sure what that is, but.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor that says when staff has it done the research, they'll bring it back to us, and then we'll vote, entertain the motion. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Okay.
Rolling our own.
And our last one is withdrawal of a small-scale comprehensive plan map amendment, preliminary plat and development agreement.
Right, and no action is needed by city council, just like at the planning and zoning board. This is just an announcement because we did advertise. So just in case there was anybody who's either listening to this, or is here in person, we wanted to let them know that the applicant actually withdrew. They said they're not moving forward at this time. So you all will not be conducting the public hearings on those items.
So they'll have to re-advertise.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
All right, that concludes the public hearing. Next up, we have the public forum where speakers are allocated 3 minutes. Our first speaker is Martinelli. Oh, very good. Mr. Ditmore, your light's on.
Too loud.
Mr.
Good
Bentley.
evening, Mayor Rose and council members. I'm Mark Martinelli. I live at 7420 Tropicana. So I have some pictures of a drainage easement problem I'm having. I only have 4 sets. Would you like to see them?
Sure, we'll pass them around, so.
communicate well, but we don't collate well. The second picture is the first one that you need to look at. So we'll do the second picture, and then we'll go from there to the first and third. So the history here, and Andrea can back me up, without her help, and first of all, I love West Melbourne, and you guys are doing a great job. So this problem has been kind of languishing for a while, and with these heavy rains of late, the hurricane, it's been an issue. So we built on those the four lots, we built in 06, and we were there forever by ourselves. No drainage problems at all. The house on the to the east was built, and still no problems, though drainage did slow up a little bit. In the meantime of that happening, the cross on Tropicana, which caused the water go from, would be, I know it's hard to visualize, it would be, it flows south, so it has to cross under Tropicana. That cross member broke, and Andrea, that's a county road, right, I believe? Mm-hmm. Andrea was instrumental in getting it fixed. So that alleviated some of the problems of water in that second picture. If you look at the second picture, then go to the first and the third. And you'll see how the water is built up there. So once the cross member, or whatever you want to call it, cross tie, whatever, was fixed, that caused the water to flow better. In the meantime, the house to my right was built, if you're following this, and they put the sewer connection right in our easement for that house, and I don't know why. So that consequently was built up by the city, or I believe it was the city, and so therein lies the problem with the majority of the water staying in my area. It just is, you would think it would flow off there, but it's right in the center of my easement is. So what I propose, if it could be done, is an analysis by the roads guys to come and see if there is a possibility that they could find a way to drain the water off my easement. Now, I've tried to work with my neighbor, and he doesn't want to mess with it. So there's due diligence on my part. I've tried to fix this problem. I even offered to do it the best I could. No, he doesn't want to do that. So now we're left with the only recourse I have is you all. Any questions?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Okay, because I'm over there frequently. If anybody on council wants to pull up Brevard County Clerk of Courts, they are in 4 Oaks Sub, and he's Lot 3. And if you look at it, you'll see that it's public utility easement, but it's private drainage easement. And as he just said, the problem happened when the house next door, they built it on a much, much higher lot. They built it so high that they were not able to hook up to the sewer. So we had to actually go and put in a lift station and put a chopper or shredder, whatever that's called, in there in order for them to hook up to that. When all that happened, and when we did that in their private drainage easement, is when all of this happened. So I would like, since actually he's asking for, since flooding has been our #1 issue that we have here in West Melbourne, even though this is a private drainage easement, we've influenced it. And if we could please continue to try to help him with this issue. He can't dig any further to drain the water up, because then where the driveway would then be higher than where he would be digging, and there's so much underground in that drainage easement where he is that he has to be very, very careful. I think if you planted corn in there, you'd probably be digging up something that you couldn't dig up. So our city workers have been over there, and they've been helping immensely. They did put in another drain under the road, which helped drain the water off that lot that was there. And that is the city part right there. It turns into county a little bit further on. But we've been working on it, but we need to do more if we can. And when I talked to Mr. Martinelli, I asked him to come here tonight, and so that each of you could talk to him directly instead of through me all the time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Staff, maybe you can get together with them and do this offline, because we're not going to solve this here.
Correct, Mayor. I'm more than happy to take a look at this and get our team on it and see what we can do.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have any other speaker cards? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next item we have is the consent agenda. We have 2 items on that. Mr. Frampus, you wanted to pull an item?
Pull 7B, please.
7B, the trench safety. Okay, go ahead and let's talk about that one. And then we can do them together, or if you want.
That's fine.
We did get an email about this.
No, I know. I had requested an updated quote on that and got it. And the update is a little bit different, and I don't know if Mr. Rodier wants to talk about this, or maybe
You direct it to Mr. Rhodey and he'll handle it.
right. It looks like we're ordering 2 boxes, correct?
Mark?
Director Picarillo's here, and we can have Director Picarillo address it.
Let me just say, I know this is an OSHA requirement, and to have the boxes for the safety of the people in the ground, and I think it's an awesome setup. I like how portable this is and all, and I just want to make sure we're getting the right thing. The corner end posts, are they stackable?
Yes.
Okay, because it looks like we're ordering 4 48-inch ones, which is 4 foot, and 4 24-inch ones, which is 2 foot corner pieces, correct? So that would give us a height of 6 foot. Is that what we're looking to get there?
What it is, it's a complete kit, so you can build it to what you need.
But with the amount of corner pieces we're ordering, our highest level we can get is 6 feet, according to this.
Yeah, we're probably not going to go much than 6 feet for other safety reasons. If we have to go that deep, it's probably going to be a contractor.
Well, we're ordering 8 of the 2x6 panels, which would give us a height of 8 feet.
Correct, but you got to realize, it depends on what configuration the box is. Those sides
understand
may
that.
be used for the widths other than the lengths also. So we could have more of a square hole on some situations, where on another hole it could be more of a rectangle box. So
No, I agree. We could go from 12 by 10 according to what you have, and up down to 12 by 4. And I like the flexibility of it. I just want to make sure we have enough. If it looks like we're ordering a lot, the 2x4s, the 2x6s, the 2x8s, 10s, and 12s. It seems to me we should have a different configuration of corner posts, which actually gives us, because initially we were going to go order, on the initial quote it said 6 foot boxes. We were going to go 6 foot deep. I didn't know if it'd be better to have the 6 foot corner posts, which I would think it'd be better to have one continuous piece of steel instead of stacking 2. Is that right? I mean, in the pictures, it doesn't look like you can stack them. That's why I asked if you could stack the corner pieces. And as far as the spreaders go, are we always going to do a 4-sided box, or?
each situation is different. If you're working over main, then you're straddling the main. So your main support is over the sides, that you're parallel with the pipe, and then depends on the size of the pipe, the corner or the ends are going to be a different height, because that's going to be where the trench is over the pipe. So you may only need 1 or 2 sections because you're straddling a 20-inch pipe, where the sides you're going to need the complete system because they're going down past the pipe.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the spreaders, I'm seeing 4 for the 35 to 48, which gives us the 4-foot section, and we're ordering 4 40 to 60, which doesn't get us to the 6-foot mark. So I'm curious of why we're ordering those as opposed to the ones that get us to the 6-foot mark, because it's only going to get us to the same as the other ones that we're ordering for less money. So I would think that we would get a wider spreader to accommodate our pieces that we have, rather than have ones that won't. That's That's kind of my question. It seems like it's, I don't know why we would order that size is why I'm asking, because it doesn't accommodate the 6-foot sections or the 8-foot sections. You know, either order bigger or order the 35 by 48s and keep it the same as the 4-foot openings, because they don't do us any good anywhere else. So that's my question to you. Should we order different size corner pieces, and should we order different size spreader pieces to accommodate our flexibility? So what do you think?
Like I said, the spreaders, we're only going to be dealing with a certain size pipe. So the biggest pipe we have is 20 inches in the city. So
But the spreaders accommodate the space of the missing wall.
Correct.
So if the missing wall, if we only can get the 4-foot anyhow, because the 40 by 60s won't get us to the 6-foot, the 72 inches for 6-foot, it only gets us to 60 inches. So they're just as good as the 4-foot. So why not order the ones that get us to 6-foot instead of the same ones that only get us to 4-foot? Like
we could change that up.
You know what I'm talking about? I'd rather see more flexibility and more ability to utilize these boxes than to not. So I'd rather order it properly the first time. And as far as the corner posts, what do you think about increasing the size of those to maybe the 72 inches? Get 4 of them at 72 inches to give you the 6-foot. It doesn't really matter if it's a little bit higher, right, than the boxes. So I'd rather have more than not enough.
No, that's fine.
And I don't.
Yes, so that would bring a question, do we have enough money in that fund to buy that? Because I think you budgeted $35,000, this is around $32,000.
Correct.
Well, I don't think the price difference is not significant. It's like $10 more to get us for the spreaders per spreader. It's like $10 more. And for the corner post, it's only $100 more to get us to the 6-foot. So it doesn't seem a significant amount for the amount of flexibility we could get out of it.
Correct.
Is everybody okay with that change, or? I don't know.
I don't know that Mark has all those numbers or pieces, or do you want to bring this back when you have it all exactly what you want, or?
It's not a significant change as long as you understand what I'm saying.
Right, you're just changing up to go to 72 inches to be more versatile.
Correct.
Fine. And
That makes sense to you, sir?
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
And if it's going to stay under the budget amount that we have,
Yeah,
which
well,
it shouldn't be that much.
easily will.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see those changes if you make them, and if it's okay with council that we allow him to, what'd you say, it was up to 35,000, Mayor?
Yeah.
So as long
Let
as,
Mark make the final decision
yep.
based on the input.
I just have a quick question. Your first estimate was the beginning of last year. Why didn't we order it last budget cycle?
That's when we just got the price starting to look into it, so.
It was the beginning of this year.
This year's budget.
Yeah, that was last budget cycle, though, yeah. Okay. And where are you going to store these? Because I know you're running out of room there at the compound.
Actually, these are going to be stored on a trailer, so they're going to be mobile. So when we need them, they're right on the trailer. We bring the whole trailer with us on the job site, and we have everything there to construct it.
All right. And you have an extra trailer, or you need to get one?
We're going to get one.
We're going to get one. All right. The two-part system. Okay. Very good. Ms. Adams? No, I'm done. All right. So did you want to make a motion to up to 35,000?
Do you want a motion to change that, or I'm okay if we're within budget and he just makes a change, so. City manager, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we get the gist of the motion. I just want to allow Director Picarell enough flexibility to buy the right items that he needs.
Sure.
You know, that's the important part.
And I don't want weight to become an issue. I don't know if these bigger ones, weigh a whole lot more and you can't handle them as well or so. I don't know.
No, that's why the system's more pliable, because
You decide.
they're aluminum, so it's user-friendly.
Mr. McDowell, you're up.
We do have a motion on the floor, correct?
No, we don't. So we'll do a motion for the whole consent agenda, but
Perfect.
They said we're not going to need a motion for this particular thing as
Change.
long as he has the flexibility.
Mr. Ditmore?
So now I'm even more lost here. So we don't need a motion for him to do anything. We pulled this, but we're not going to pass it
We
as
have a
presented?
motion to pass,
As presented? Or,
pass this with the changes in mind.
It's an agenda.
Pass it with the suggested changes.
and the suggested changes are to go to 35,000 and let him pick what he wants? Is that pretty much it?
Pretty much.
Is that it?
It can go up to 35,000.
I think as long as he makes the decision what he needs, I mean, it's up to him, so, okay, I'm fine with that. Okay.
Do you want to make?
I'm sorry. All right, make a motion to pass the consent agenda with the changes to item
7B.
7B. Allow the city manager through staff to allow up to 35,000 for the equipment needed.
Ms. Adams?
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries completely in unison. All right. Next, we have the action agenda, amendment to initial site plan for Eden at Heritage Lakes. Ms. Adams?
You still talking?
Just give me 1 minute to load this up, please.
Boy.
Okay, Eden Living is the developer. This development is near I-95 and the new interchange, the Ellis Road interchange. And they came to staff and asked about, amending the initial site plan's architectural features. So that's what this conversation is going to be about. They talked about sort of three sets: modifying the approved exterior building facade from stucco to hardy plank siding, eliminating the first floor sliding doors and incorporating French doors with a canvas awning, dark gray in color, and then the last thing is eliminating the second floor sliding doors and balconies and replacing with, it's not really a large window, but it's 2 windows. So the project history is that, just now in September of 2021, we did give initial site plan approval. At that time, the council talked about their concern about the view of these buildings from I-95. There was sort of a compromise by incorporating balconies on the second floor to provide some building mass relief, so that's what was included. And then the final plat, which allowed them, to have their own separate lot for the Eden Living. And remember, Eden Living folks are here, so they could tell you all about what their product is. But remember, it's what they call that horizontal rental community. That they have a lot of the buildings that look like single family, and then they have some of the buildings on the perimeter that are the 2-story product. So July is when the developer submitted to staff to modify the building facade to eliminate the sliding glass doors and balconies and replace with large windows on the second floor. There was some discussion that we had about having awnings over, the second floor windows with the changes they were doing. We finally got back, some drawings, and that's when, in September, when we did get back the revised drawings, the developer then mentioned, and by the way, it's not these other changes, it's also changing from the solid stucco, which is what the image represented, to the hardy plank, the horizontal siding. And then, we told them, well, these are substantial enough changes, they really need to come here to City Council for their deliberation. You know, the developer will tell you more about their justification. We did have them submit a letter, so we have it for the record, and this is what they mention as some of the items of their justification for the siding, and that image is one of the images they provided, you know, of what the new material would look like on the two-story product. This is just a two-dimensional view, black and white. A lot of architects use this to draw up, you know, what they need to for the building permits and whatnot. They would, like I said, replace those first floor canvas with canvas awnings instead of what they had shown previously, which was the sliders. So in these views on the left-hand side was what was shown to City Council, you know, and that was, you know, those balconies with the slider doors on the second floor, and on the first floor you had, you know, the French doors. That was the initial architecture. So you can see that when I talk about architecture, it's not really the shape of the building, it's more the features. So it's sort of the ornamentation and the fenestration is what they call it technically. And then the proposed architecture, you know, that's where I have the same circles to sort of give you, you know, reference point that the building appears, you know, massive, because in the way that we look at this, there's not as much, you know, mass relief provided. There's narrow windows, no balcony, small awning. I see dots on the roof. I don't know if those are skylights, but they could certainly, you know, tell us what those little dots are in the roof. So again, this is just the units that you would see potentially from I-95. They did provide us with a revised view of what you could see from I-95, and so, you know, I'll let them talk about this. This is just to take their again, the horizontal living, you know, their wording for this unit that is really a rental unit that looks like single family, but the top view is what they showed us initially back in September of 2021. This bottom view was with this last set of drawings that they submitted, what the new siding would look like. You know, there are obviously some differences besides paint, color. There's, you know, differences in what they have for the siding, and then some of what they were doing around the windows. You know, I wanted to let you know that, you know, none of this architectural stuff sort of existed in a vacuum. We have an intent statement in the Gateway Interchange zoning, which is where they're at, about having, you know, attractive physical environment, which is why with the initial site plan, those architectural drawings, you know, were included, was to, you know, show that they complied with that portion. And then there's some other architectural criteria that's actually in the Gateway Interchange, you know, and they had complied with that too. So I will let you know that, you know, in looking at that architectural criteria that's in the zoning code, they still comply with it by using, you know, the hardy plank. But then the red bullet is to tell you the elimination of the second floor balcony disregards the code requirement, in our opinion, to provide building mass relief. It's not really consistent with those design requirements. But they're, of course, going to say that it is consistent. I'm just letting you know, from our perspective, it's sort of a diminution of what we wanted, which was building mass relief, you know, so that your eye really is drawn to a lot of the features on it. We have this map available in case you all needed to reference it. You know, there's quite a few condominiums, townhouses, you know, and apartments throughout the city with different architecture. All we did in the staff report was provide you with some example. I didn't want to provide all of the different architecture, but you'll see that a lot of the apartment buildings, they do use a mix of different materials, you know, of the hardy plank siding, and then they use concrete or stucco, you know, so you have everything sort of from A to Z, but it's always a mix. It's never just one material. So I will let you know that's kind of what we saw in our limited review of what we have out there. The building official, I talked to the building official too. You know, he said that hardy plank is cost effective and durable. You know, stucco cracks over time, but basically any material you have on a building, you're going to have to maintain. You know, yes, the hardy plank's more durable, but there still is some maintenance. You know, stucco, there's obviously maintenance that needs to be done. You know, we also included some of this in case you all wanted to see pros and cons. Sometimes you all get into discussions like that. It's not something that really, you know, changes that much in terms of, you know, building massing. But again, if you wanted to know more about the material, you know, you could. So in conclusion, we really think it was an item that, was part of the initial site plan. You all give the initial site plan approval, and I really felt that this needed to come back to you all in terms of what they're doing, with these buildings, and maybe not so much what they call the horizontal living of the single story, but for those, second story types of changes. And that's why we said for number 2, if you all feel that, the changes should be approved, they need to do a little bit more to meet the code for embellishment of the second floor. The representative is here. What we have on this slide, and I know because of the lines, it's really hard to tell that the top is sort of the before, what you saw September 2021. The bottom image is really, what they submitted in the last week. So that would be the difference. And I stuck this in. This is a photo from Europe because I'm part European. And this is to let you all know that, when I talk about architectural embellishments and whatnot, those are regular walls. That's paint that makes it look like columns and bricks. That's not architectural features sticking out. So, I want to let you all in the audience know it's not that staff dictates to them, you shall put this and that and the other. We give them the option. You decide, you come up with something, come back to us. So like I said, I know it got a lot of smiles, but that's a real building there in Europe that has, for the most part, plain Jane walls, but they really dressed it up. And this is what I believe the applicant wants to talk to you all about.
Thank you. Does the developer want to address City Council?
Gregor Love, 215 North Eola Drive, Lowndes Law. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I do have a presentation. I don't know if we could pull that up. Thank you. It has been just over a year since I saw all of you. Well, not all of you. I think there are a few new faces in the crowd. So, candidly, I was looking forward to being before you again. I did not think it would be on this project. Nonetheless, I'm happy to be here. Thank you. So, a little over a year ago, when we last discussed this initial site plan, I was here. Tia Jesse, who's here with Eden Living, was here as well, and there was a lot of discussion about the initial site plan. You had questions about the layout of the site plan, certainly the safety aspects of the site plan. I think we talked about a mail kiosk and how that would operate. And there was discussion about the appearance of the project, especially from I-95, and that's what Christy talked about. And in connection with that, the applicant did show some conceptual renderings at that time. And they did believe those to be conceptual. They believed that they were consistent with code, that they met code, and ultimately City Council agreed with that. But in the months following that approval, the developer began, so the real engineering and designing work in connection with Christie and really honing in on the specific details of what the individual buildings would end up looking like. And this is what I believe Christie showed you a moment ago. She may have showed you the other rendering that was the newer one. This is the old rendering that was showed back in September of last year. And this is the view from Interstate 95, just to give you some context for what this would appear like. And you can see there's the balconies, and then there's the stucco material that's surrounding the building. The decision to sort of move away from stucco and from the balconies was reached by the developer, and I can give some context for how that decision was reached. And there's the new rendering. Regarding stucco, I think that Christie's staff report did a good job of just outlining the fact that they reached the conclusion that hardy plank is just a superior material for this product. It's more durable. It has an aesthetic appeal that the developer feels is superior to stucco, and so that's ultimately what led to the decision to move away from stucco to hardy plank. And the developer is here. She's been working with the engineers and with city staff and can provide more information if you want it, but I don't want to spend too much time on that because it's pretty well briefed in your staff report. The balconies, one, I'll move back to this elevation. One thing that the developer began to look at is the floor plan and sort of the basic appeal of a balcony. And I understand and appreciate that you are concerned with the view of this project from I-95. That's really the main view of it. The developers started to think about the view of I-95 and what utility for its new tenants would be presented by balconies with that view. And when they started to look at whether it made sense to include those balconies, they redesigned it and found out that, in fact, the balconies, if they were to take those away, their floor plan becomes more functional. And once they started to redesign that, they looked at the sliding glass doors. The sliding glass doors that were used to access those balconies, they've had operational issues with sliding glass doors in the past. They decided to move away from that and replace them with French doors. Instead of just removing the double doors that lead out to the balcony, they replaced them with large glass windows, you can see there. And I'll move on now to the actual rendering. So they replaced those with large glass windows, and then on the bottom floor, they replaced the sliding door and have a large glass window to the side of those doors. So that's what ultimately led to the decision to sort of redesign the aesthetic, is the material and the balconies. And I have a great respect for Christie, and so I will say I respectfully disagree with the conclusion that this elevation does not satisfy the land development code. I think that this satisfies the letter of the code, and it certainly satisfies the intent of the code. And I'll just read the section that we're discussing. So, all buildings with 100 feet or more of wall space shall contain columns, facade engraving, etching, recessing, and protruding wall planes, columns, porches, overhangs, or other features to provide mass relief. That's not an and, it's an or. These are options for providing mass relief. And what we have here, you can see in red, those are the proposed awnings. The etching, the material of the actual hardy plank itself provides some architectural relief along the horizontal line of the building and the individual lines that you see going vertically. There's separation between those walls and the back wall. You can sort of see it displayed here in the form of shadows down there that will provide some mass building relief. And also it's important to remember that this is the Gateway Interchange District. A residential building in this district can be 65 feet. So it's obvious why you don't want a 65-foot building that's entirely flat. This is a two-story building. This is not the type of building that the code, I think, was intending to prevent from from appearing this way. I think that non-residential buildings within this district can be up to 120 feet. So it's obvious what the code was intended to do, to protect, but this elevation provides the mass building relief that's being requested. And finally, to the request from staff that we have some sort of articulation on top, either an awning, some sort of overhang. The red awnings you see there are functional, that they would actually provide protection for the tenant from rain as they came out the back door. If we were to provide any awnings on the second floor, it would be wholly ornamental. It would provide nothing for the tenant, and it would be more difficult to maintain for the actual property owners association. So for those reasons, we think that these proposed changes are consistent with the Land Development Code. I'm here to answer questions. As I said, I've been in the background since I talked to you last. Tia has been, on the ground floor with all this. She can answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, you're first.
And I have questions. I was actually in the audience when you first presented to this, so I'm aware, I remember the project, and I remember council's discussion on it. I'm going to start with my easier questions first. The pictures that were shown in, I believe, Christie's slides, are we expecting skylights? Were those not?
Those are vents.
Okay. I wasn't 100% sure, so I wanted to check on those. Thank you. Is the hardy plank one color, multiple colors?
My understanding is it's intended to be one color.
So the conceptual drawing that was recently shown is not accurate?
Which drawing are you referring to?
It was a couple slides back. But not on his? No, not on his. It was on yours.
Yeah.
I just noticed there was a difference.
Hi, I'm Tia Jesse with Eden Living. We are the developer and owner of the project, and I did, just regarding that, no, if you look at the different renderings that we have that were previously shown, the recent change to these renderings were just to simply show the hardy plank. Any other changes that you're seeing on these, and obviously, reflecting these changes as well with the addition of the windows and removal of the balconies. Any other changes you're seeing are not, I just noticed in that one, there was the white paint all across and not the gray paint. That is not necessarily accurate.
Let's go back. So there was 2 images that we showed of the single floor, the horizontal living. The one on the top had multiple colors. The one on the bottom that they sent us was just monolithic color. Are you saying that it wasn't supposed to be just?
It was not supposed to be monolithic color.
Well, that's what we got. I mean, if we weren't ready for this, you should have indicated that.
Okay, well, again, paint, I can do anything with paint. And the intent, and my intent for the paint on these buildings is to be what was initially shown to in the original renderings. Again, we're open, paint's not, not a problem for us. And that's something that, we wanted to also discuss this evening, in these rear elevations. If it would make everyone feel better, we can do different things with paint on the back of these buildings. I mean, those are things we definitely are willing to consider, and not anything that would cause us any hardship, and we would be happy to do those. We can paint this any color. So we buy it, it comes in white, but it's just like stucco. It's paintable in any way. But again, the intent is to keep the original color scheme that was shown in the renderings previously, which is mainly, we do have whites, we have some light grays, there are some darker gray accents. The roofs are accurately depicted in a darker gray. And we do have some, I think there's some pale blues that are shown on these 2-story buildings as well on the front side. But I do want to point something out quickly, just to be clear. This is an actual photograph that was taken last week. And you can see in there, in the image that's on the screen, there's a blue fence. That's actually the construction fence that's in place. So we had one of our consultants go ahead and take these buildings and drop them into this real photograph with the existing vegetation, as well as the addition of some of the landscaping that we have shown on our plans. So this is accurate versus when we presented last time, we just did a colored elevation, was what you guys saw last year. So I do want to just point out that this is an accurate representation, and it also kind of communicates that this, from the edge of right-of-way to the back of our buildings, or to our property line, I should say, is about 265 feet, and it's quite a distance. And again, this is existing vegetation with some of the things that we're going to be planting. It's pretty far away. And I know there was concern, Christie's expressed concern in the back just in general, and it was brought up at the last year during our approvals that, what the backs of these would look like. But I just do want to emphasize that a lot of this is screened as well. So I'm not to minimize or diminish any of the requests that have been made, but I just want to keep it in perspective that, this is not a building that you are driving around the back of and seeing in full 100% view at any given time.
Correct, and I understand that, but it is a building that's going to be in our community and impact what that looks like. I do understand that the hardy plank is in our code, and that West Melbourne has seen a transition over time with the finishing materials that can be used for apartments. However, I heard multiple times that the hardy plank is more cost-effective, and there was a claim that it's a ultimately better building material. Christy, in your opinion, do you think that hardy plank is superior in building to stucco?
Well, I really don't have expertise in that. That's why I asked the building official. And he indicated that in terms of sort of the normal maintenance, the hardy plank was probably superior. But yeah, everything, then he followed that up by saying everything needs to be maintained, and everything on the exterior of a building needs to be maintained.
Regardless of which material it is. Okay.
I would like to address that, though. These buildings are wood frame. And so the real issue with stucco comes when you're applying it on a wood frame building. So that's really, I mean, there have been numerous, you can do a quick Google search and find numerous lawsuits. D.R. Horton, our neighbors to the south, have been involved in some heavy-duty lawsuits related to water intrusion, related to stucco cracks on wood frame. So in a wood frame product, hardy plank is indisputably a better material to use. And as we've spoken to Tom Forbes at length about it, when we told him that we were going to be doing hardy plank in our first meetings with him, he said, he was, just a great choice. To do anything else just doesn't make sense. So it is, cost-wise, we say cost-effective. Is it less expensive to apply than stucco? I don't know that it necessarily is. It's just a better material, and frankly, a lot of the general contractors in the industry won't apply stucco on wood frame buildings because of liability issues. So.
And yet that was what was brought to council last year.
No, and I do want to clarify that as well, and I had, Christy and I had spoken about this. When the renderings that were brought to council last year were renderings that were done when we developed this product type. They were done at the initial development of our plans. They were done, honestly, for simplicity and ease. They were just shown as a plain finish. It wasn't meant to indicate stucco or anything else. And I understand that because it was a smooth finish, that's what it did seem to indicate. It wasn't a conscious decision to depict it that way. That's just how the renderers showed it. So when this came up with the siding, we had, when we went through the construction document process and meeting with contractors, and the decision was made to build this product out of wood, and was also made to, to go ahead and use the hardy plank siding, we didn't even know that would be of any issue. And so we didn't come back and bring it to Christy until we came back with the balconies, and we sent it an elevation, and she noted that it had the siding. And frankly, we were caught off guard because we didn't know that would be of an issue, because we never had, I don't know that we had stated anywhere that the product would be, finished with stucco. Obviously, I understand how it was assumed that it was by the pictures, but we, again, didn't, we didn't change it and we weren't doing stucco and then changed it to hardy plank. That was just what the renderings depicted. And we just depicted a smooth finish, which it seemed to indicate stucco.
It may have been during the discussions. Tia Jesse's right. It wasn't specifically called out in the staff report, and it wasn't called out, in their images. But yes, there is an assumption a smooth finish is usually stuck. I mean, you can ask anybody in the industry. That's usually the assumption. There were a lot of items that were brought up in that September meeting, and as you said, you listened to some of them. And I think because the architecture, looked a certain way, then council was comfortable with it. But, in staff's mind, and that's something we'll make sure we specify on some of these drawings going forward, is what the developer thinks the materials are when we bring the initial site plan, because that's certainly the intent when we bring an initial site plan to you all, is for you all and staff to understand what the material is going to be.
Okay. Transitioning to the embellishments, I know that you had felt that the hardy plank enhances that aesthetic of the building. Ultimately, as I look through the images that were included in our report, frankly, I don't see that the embellishments that were added in lieu of the ones that were removed are the same caliber of the pieces that you chose to remove, those balconies and other things. I understand the argument that, do residents necessarily want to see 95? They're going to see it through a window. So personally, if it comes down to a window or a balcony, I think our city in general, that's a prettier piece to add to a building. I think it enhances that. I think our concern is still there that you see it from 95, and that represents West Melbourne. So I don't agree with that statement, and removing those, I think, are a concern. So I don't, to be honest, don't love the changes.
Thank you. Mr. Ditmore, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. So just want to clarify. Well, I spoke to Mr. Rotary earlier about this, but Christie had a question. So I'm clear, and I think I'm clear. The staff does not support the recommendation to make any of these changes, correct?
Well, if you all support it.
Well, I want to know what you support. I want your answer. What does staff want? We rely on you to make these decisions, and then to bring to us.
I mean, if we're going to try to be sort of consistent across the community, there's a mix of materials. I think we're getting closer with what they've, presented and thought about, but all the other apartments have a mix of materials. It's not just one single material. They do provide, ornamentation, fenestration on the second floors. I don't think that this has gone far enough to meet that.
So is there a way that they could do the hardy plank and still keep the elevation, the initial elevation appearance that was presented in September of last year?
I don't know, that we're going to have some discussions. You'll have to talk to your architect and your building people. And
We can't do the balconies.
Okay. Well, that's fine, because I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to make a motion that we deny your application. We were given a certain thing. The balconies is what we saw last year, and that's what we were expecting. And I'm going to make a motion that we deny it at this time based on staff recommendation. I'd be willing to meet you guys halfway, if we could do something with the hardy plank, but I like the original, and I'm going to make a motion that we deny the change.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Bentley. Ms. Young? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I was kind of thinking along the same way. When we saw this the first time, we made our decision based on what was presented to us. Having lived in this type of housing with and without balconies, I much prefer the balcony. It's very nice to have the balcony to open up things there, and you can go in and out your balcony. It opens up your whole living space. You can put some nice potted plants out there. Yes, they're off of 95, but as you said, it's 295 feet. It's quite a way, so you would get used to whatever traffic you had. In fact, where I lived on one, it was about that far from a highway, and it was just fine. I like having the balcony, and as you mentioned, yes, we do care what this looks like off 95, but we certainly care about the people that live there as well. And I would want the best, that they would be happy living there. The only compromise I would be willing to make would be the hardy board. I couldn't understand that. I would prefer that it was concrete block that the stucco was on, but I understand it's not. So if you wanted to keep the same elevation, the same balcony, same everything else, and do the hardy board, I would compromise with that, but that would be all.
Thank you. Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what Deputy Mayor was saying on the finishing, because first of all, from this drawing here, to me, it's from that distance, it looks like it's flat. So, I mean, whether it's the hardy board or not, and coming from the Midwest, we use it a lot. So I'm pretty comfortable in seeing that. Here, it's different with stucco. That's not an issue. I think the real issue is the changes to the balcony. I think that's what's going on here. And what would have been interesting is, had I not had the visual of what that balcony looked like before, and then seeing this, how radically would I have changed my view? If I was just looking at it objectively, I still would say, boy, that's pretty boring. I would say that looks like a boring building. And regardless of the amenities, regardless of the efficiency and all that stuff, it does not look near as pleasing. So I'll support it. I'll support the fact that I don't think we should go forward with this.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we had an image in our, at least I had in my mind, an image based on the last discussion that we had, I think it was last year, actually. And I think we had a very long, as I recall, it seemed like we had a pretty detailed discussion, and I'm not sure if it was Mr. Frampus or Mr. Detmore that really brought up the visual of the flatness of that building from I-95. Was it Dan?
No, this Dan.
Oh, this Dan, okay. Well, okay, thank you. And with the balconies on here, I think we all said, okay, that does break this up, takes away some of that flatness effect, and that's what we all agreed to. And maybe you're saying now that that's not what you guys meant, even though that's what every one of these council members assumed. I'm not willing to come down off that. I think it's not nearly doing what we intended for it to do without the features that were in it originally. And about the this other board, that whatever that's called, cement board, whatever it's called, hardy board, I'm probably would be okay with that. I have to look a little more into that, but probably would be okay with that. But I'm not okay without the balconies. Thank you, Mayor.
And I'll just make a quick comment. What you're showing us now looks pretty institutional. Don't like that look. It just is not an institutional place for it. Also, I think I could go with hardy board on the bottom because of the rain, and if you're worried about those things, and the top be stucco to break up that monotony with the balcony. Did you want any closing comments?
Could we have a moment to just confer
Yeah, sure.
before?
We'll look. Can we take
a 5-minute break?
Yeah, 5-minute break.
applicant, and we had some discussions about potential resolutions and considerations that the applicant may want to provide to staff, and staff may want to evaluate before the council takes any kind of action on what's proposed before you tonight. So I think the applicant would like to request that you continue this matter to the November 1st meeting, if that's possible.
I'm about to withdraw my motion. So, Mayor, based on speaking with our city attorney, I'm going to withdraw my motion and make a motion to table this until November the 1st.
Ms. Adams?
I'll second.
Continue.
Continue.
Is it continue or tabled?
Continue, please.
Okay, may I revise that? Continue this until November the 1st.
And then we don't, yeah.
All right. You probably need a second on that.
I'll accept that.
All right.
All right. All those in favor? Did you want to say something first? Okay.
That's it.
A motion to table, I don't think is debatable, right?
It's a continue. If somebody wants to have a final thought, we could.
Mr. McDowell?
Is everything up for discussion? Is that what we're basically saying we're going to just not think about what we heard today?
There's going to be what you see coming back may not be exactly what you see before you today. So we're going to kind of give some time to consider those alternatives.
All right, because my memory is really difficult of what happened a year ago, so I can't. A month is a stretch for me, so we're just gonna whatever comes. Then we'll discuss it then.
Actually, it's our next meeting.
Next meeting.
Yes, it is.
Oh, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I can handle that. Thanks.
You sure? Are you okay? Because we can.
We'll get you a copy of this. We'll get you a copy of this. It's only been 33 minutes and 34 seconds, so you can handle that. Thank you all for being with you. Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Anything else, Mr. Cliff? Okay. Our next item, let me turn the page here, is our next item is, let me just make sure I didn't turn too many. I did. Is approve the city attorney's employment agreement. As you may recall, we had a interview and a 7-0 vote to hire Mr. Carey, and in the interim, everybody that wanted to sent their comments to the city manager, and the city manager and myself met with Mr. Carey last week, and as you can see from the agreement, salary $147,500, part of the retirement system, health insurance, and you have all that there. The only thing will be left after we sign this is that will initiate the background check, credit check, and those things, and then he will be our attorney. All right. So what's to the council? Mr. Frampus?
Thank you, Mayor. My only problem with the contract is the outside representation. I don't agree that it does say that our employment contract is a sole paid employment, but it gives them the option to pick up work from other cities and municipalities. And I just, being a new attorney, and I just really don't like this clause in the contract. And I know that our previous attorney had something similar to that, and I don't agree with it. And I can't support this contract with that in it. The pro bono work is fine with me, but I can't see how that he would be able to do work for other city municipalities without doing it on city time. So I don't support that. Thank you.
Well, as part of that, I believe it just says Melbourne Village, if I'm not, okay. I mean, that's the main one that we're talking about, and.
Well, regardless whether it's Melbourne Village or not, he needs to learn our city. And
correct.
And I just believe that he should be focusing on our city, and that's it. This doesn't is not specific to Melbourne Village, and who knows, maybe he could retain some of his other cities that he works for. It's not specific. And I just disagree with it. I just think that it should be removed from the contract.
As
Thank you.
far as Melbourne Village, and we did have discussion with him with Melbourne Village, it's more of a courtesy since they don't use an attorney very often, and he would do his work, as he said, night and weekends, and it's only a few hours a month.
Well, I don't know of
So no, I'm just telling you, I'm not having that debate back and forth, but I'm just telling you what he said. So.
Okay, and I'm going to say that I don't know that he can't file anything with any of the courts that's not 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, so for anybody else. So it would be on our dime. Thank you.
Please note also that the city attorney, city manager, and some of the other positions, they're not an 8 to 5 typical job. They're not clocking in and clocking out. They're not hourly employees. So whether he does outside or not, you can't hold somebody like that to the hours because they're here till the job is done. Is there anything else on that part you would add, Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, just to reiterate what the mayor had commented, we did have a good discussion with Mr. Carey about the Melbourne Village. He did have some interest in helping them out after giving it some thought. Certainly got the impression from Mr. Carey and from former attorney Morris Richardson that it is a very limited basis, that they're sometimes can only amount to a couple hours a month, that they are looking for a little bit of guidance that's not covered by some of the stuff that they do. So did want to mention that we had a good conversation about it. Certainly concern, we're all here to do the job of West Melbourne, and that's first and foremost. He did seem to indicate that that wouldn't be a problem, that he would be doing it on his own time, away from the city of West Melbourne's time, and be committed to doing everything that was needed here at the city of West Melbourne. And so I know it's a sensitive, topic. We did have a good discussion with him, and I think after having that discussion with him, we certainly, I won't speak for the mayor, I certainly got the impression that if he was going to be doing anything for Melbourne Village, it would be on his time away from City of West Melbourne time.
This is not something he suggested to put it on a contract, correct? This is something that was stated that this is what our past attorney did, and would you be interested? It's not like he brought it to us, so for us to keep him as our sole attorney and eliminate it from the contract would probably not affect the contract in his eye. Is that correct?
That I don't know. I mean, we certainly, from time to time, myself included, will help out other local governments. I don't think the intent of the language here is to prevent any of that. I use the example with our current attorney and our former attorney. Morris Richardson did help out his community on a I don't know if it was a planning and zoning versus building board. I can't remember the exact example, but from time to time, attorneys do help each other out in that way. And so I don't think the intent was to have any issue with that.
He did that for fee base or pro bono?
He did that for fee base, outside, limited basis. I'm aware of assistance to Mel Beach that he gave. It's very limited basis stuff, but the section 12 of the contract regarding outside representation provides that those services are subject to advance notification of the council. So
each time he wants to do something, he's going to bring it to us first?
If there was a representation, that's what the contract says. So if there was a representation that created some type of a problem for the council, then you would have advance notice of that. You could address it then. Consistent with what the city manager's telling you. This is the idea is a limited scope ability to provide services to other public agencies, and that's very common of those who are the top legal representatives of a public agency. It's not, that is
To
not
me,
that
that's what your firm's for, sir. It's for these little agencies to come to you and hire you to represent them. So, I mean, I don't know why we would provide our in-house attorney to do that. So it's still my recommendation and to remove it, and I wouldn't support it with it in there. Thank you.
Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. On Section 2, the salary and evaluation, it talks about doing an annual review, which is pretty standard, but it also mentions one at 6 months. Is it anticipated you would do a salary adjustment in 6 months?
No.
It was not, but that is solely the discretion of the city council.
Okay, so it's up to the council at that point in 6 months if they want to do one or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe we have the same thing with the city manager. Is it just kind of take a pulse at that time?
Okay. I just didn't know if, I knew we were taking a poll, I just didn't know if we were considering salary changes.
I thought it just said annual, the annual review for salary, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Was this a question?
Anything else?
Yes, there is more.
Based on the annual performance evaluation.
That would embarrass me to ask that one, so I'm not going to ask that one. Outside representation I have down here, and I mentioned, I wrote down here Melbourne Village. I thought we'd probably go along with that part of it. City attorney to perform limited compensated legal services to other public agencies. I kind of thought we were, I know we've already, you guys have already discussed this, but that we were sort of okay maybe with a Melbourne Village, but it's not limited in any fashion at all, right? It just says perform limited compensated. I don't know what limited means to each individual person. Were we not just wanting to limit it to Melbourne Village, for example? Is that a no, a yes?
Yeah, I think the challenge with that language is from time to time, again, myself included, I've been asked to be hearing officer on HR issues where another city manager has a conflict. I think from time to time that happens with city attorneys where an issue comes up, and a good example that I always use in this situation is if the Board of Adjustments makes a ruling that planning and zoning and the city council are not fans of, all those entities need their own attorney in the room the night of the meeting to make sure they're all staying in their lane. And so what is common is attorneys will reach out and say, you know, city attorney in Palm Bay, can you do us a favor Wednesday night? Can you represent the Board of Adjustments on this one item? And so I would hate to, again, these are very infrequent. I mean, Cliff can probably tell you how many times this happens in an average year because he's pretty dialed into Brevard County, but it's very infrequent. I would hate to limit because as we ask for favor, you know, Cliff is here due to a favor that Morris has done in years past for Cliff and some of his communities, you know, so those favors obviously come back.
Yeah, it's a very limited community of municipal lawyers in Brevard County. And as Mr. Hody stated, there are time to time when you will have conflicts in your representations. It's just inherent. The community is small enough still that you have those. That's the nature of the help that Mr. Richardson had given to me in Melbourne Beach on a conflict issue. The ability to be able to do that, to have your attorney be able to step into those roles is helpful going both ways because invariably that person may need assistance on something that you can help them on as well. So again, it's a limited provision. I don't think that there's any idea that this would ever be interpreted to allow the city attorney to take a job that would really interfere with the duties of the city of West Melbourne. Again, you have advance notification of it, so if that presents a problem, or if there's a representation that you don't have advanced knowledge of that you get knowledge of that creates a problem, then obviously you can address that under the agreement. So you are you do have some level of confidence that there's not going to be just a lot of work behind the scenes going on for some entity that you're not aware of.
Right. I agree, and I'm fine with it. Actually, I think Mr. Rohde's can make the evaluation on those case-by-case basis, whether it affects anything to do with the city or not, so I trust his judgment. And I do understand, you know, cities are going to give and take and help each other to some extent, and that's something we should all encourage, actually. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. I do not want to belabor this, but I was struggling with this the first time this came up, because to me, why wouldn't that just be professional services that the city would offer to another city? Why would we're doing that currently? So why is there some legal reason? Because attorneys, with all due respect, they're not entrepreneurial here. They're working as employees of an organization. And I'm not saying slavery is long gone, I get it. But the thing is that they are contracted. Why wouldn't we contract directly with those cities for that? Why would we let the attorney go off and kind of create a different contract?
You mean as far as the assistance on conflict issues?
Professional services, Mr. Rohde just said he does it.
Yeah.
He does professional services. How is a lawyer different than a city manager for doing professional services?
I'm trying to find a good way to answer your question.
No difference.
This, as much as I like to be altruistic in my service to public entities, at least from my perspective, we do live in a capitalized society, and I certainly have no shame in making an income from what I do. And I don't think that any lawyer that works, whether it be on the private side or the public side, has any shame in the salary that they draw or the ability to earn income. In the situation that I'm making reference to, the issue was a conflict issue on a code enforcement matter that was relatively involved and required some level of assistance outside of time frame that Mr. Richardson was working on West Melbourne things, but it did require a level of effort that I believe that he should have been compensated for from the city. He was certainly providing that service on behalf of the town, although in a limited fashion. And
Understood.
So that's.
But it's not illegal.
The basis. No, I mean it's not an issue where the city is saying, hey, we'll come in, and necessarily the city of West Melbourne's not helping. It's the attorney saying, hey, I'll step in and help you out on that. So I believe that they have. They should have the right to be compensated for that time if they're assisting another entity.
The fire marshals, right? Don't we reciprocate between cities and do that kind of stuff? So there's different services that are extended.
Tons of time where you'll assist another lawyer without seeking any compensation for that, just out of the professional relationships that you have. But there are times where that assistance goes a little bit above and beyond just a courtesy call or a research file that you help give somebody.
Thank you, Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you. Okay, Cliff, I'm going to start speaking, and I want you to interrupt me if I'm saying anything that's wrong here, okay? All right. I want to clarify a couple points. I know this took place with Melbourne Village in the past, and there's a reason why I'm bringing up Melbourne Village, because it's going to be kind of really important here. So these are questions that are kind of redundant, so I mean, we pretty much know the answer to them, but I might be wrong. Can you file after hours in the Brevard Clerk of Courts, your filings? Do they have electronic filing after hours? You can? Okay. Yes. Do the judges work in the evenings and on the weekends for emergencies? Any type of, are they doing those type of things? Are they holding hearings on the weekends?
Yes.
They do? Okay, all right. If someone were to be, with those decisions to have those hearings on the weekends or after hours, is that made up by the attorney, or is that actually made by the court, or by circumstance, or both?
Circumstance.
Circumstance. Okay. So if something happened the previous night and somebody needed to do something the next day, that necessarily would probably be on city time here, more than likely, if it was during the week, correct? Up at the Brevard clerk or the Brevard court system. more than likely, if it happened during the week.
Calls for speculation, but yes.
Yes, okay, gotcha, all right. So I think, so there's a, I'm going to use this term, regular attorney of record, so we'll call like the regular attorney of record. So look, the company that your firm, and also Mr. Carey's firm that he has, they represent municipalities throughout the state, and they go into these things. I'm really concerned about Melbourne Village because I think they're going to have some legal issues coming up because they lost their police department, their police chief, all this. There's been a lot of stuff going on, and there was a lot of angry things going on back in the day. And I know Mr. Richardson was spending a lot of time over there with some of these issues that were going on at their meetings and so forth. I think the PRN stuff, I'll call it, the as needed, like when you have things that come up, I think that's a great idea to do those type of things. But to be referenced as the attorney of record for the city or for the village of Melbourne Village or somewhere else, I think is a kind of a bit of a jump, where they can actually, I think there's a difference between being their attorney of record versus someone that steps in if there's like an issue like that's been explained to us, like something might come up that we need to help out on. So the regular attorney of record, I don't think our attorney should be the regular attorney of record for another jurisdiction. I think to help people out when something comes up, maybe on occasion, like where they have an instance of conflicts of interest, to be there, to be the voice to bounce things, I think those things are great. But to be the regular attorney of record, I think that's could be a problem, especially if they start having issues and they're going to have to contract out anyways. They're going to have to bring in some contract attorneys. Am I right, Cliff, on some of this, or am I out there? More than likely, I wouldn't want our attorney to be wrapped up in their legal issues.
I don't know enough about the situation at Melbourne Village to really.
Well, they lost their police department. They lost their. They lost their entire police department recently. There was a conflict between the former mayor there, I think, or whatever it is that they call over there, and the police chief. There was some goings back and forth for a while over there, and would lead one to believe that there was probably going to be some legal issues coming up in the future. And I just don't want to tie our guy who's coming in brand new to what's going on over there. They've had some serious issues. So is there a difference between what you're talking about and someone actually being the regular attorney all the time, full-time attorney for them?
My limited understanding of the situation with Melbourne Village is that they had a very they had a very small amount of legal work to be done, and that Mr. Richardson did that job because it didn't interfere with his duties here. And so he felt comfortable assuming that role. I think the idea or the concept, as Mr. Carey understands it, although I've never talked to him about it, is that he could do that in the same way as long as it didn't affect his role here.
And do we know if it's, and again, is it his idea to do this, or is it kind of suggested that he pick up that and run with that as it was?
I think the contract provision is just broad enough that a similar situation, whether it be Melbourne Village or some other jurisdiction that you all are advised of that doesn't interfere with those duties of the West Melbourne could be done. That's all that allows for.
And my concern also is that I think, Mr. Bentley, I mentioned that you'd have leave it up to Mr. Brody. As much as I would like that to happen, it's really not up to Mr. Brody. It's really up to council, because the attorney being a charter officer, he can't really control what he does. He operates independently. So I think that would become an issue. But, you know, I'm just kind of, it doesn't, I don't know if I don't want Mr. Carey to believe that the council wants him to do this. If Mr. Carey decides to want to do some things on his own volition, that it's not our intent to be the backup or be the, you know, to be the offered legal services to Melbourne Village for, you know, contract out with our persons. Like, we don't have our police officers don't go over and work extra jobs over there, you know. That's never happened that I'm aware of. We don't send our officers over there to work. But would there be any difference in that? You know, it'd be the same thing. Well, officers are going to go over and help today, but they have sheriff over there now. But
no, but sometimes an officer off the clock can work a security detail somewhere.
It's a similar. Where's our police? Is there any of our police officers working at Target or anything like that in Melbourne Village? Have they ever worked any off-duty jobs over there that you're aware of? In years past, they have. They have. Not any time Not anytime recently, okay. So this would be, you know, I just want to make sure that Mr. Carey knows that it's not something that we expect him to do. And the last question I have here for this about this is, it's my understanding that although we can't officially do anything, because if a private company, a law firm, offers services to a municipality, that we can't, as a group, not an individual, he can go out and do it, but we can't really support that because the private company has the ability to do that business first. We can't come in and circumvent a private company that wants to do business with and offer services to the public. Does that make sense? So,
I'm not sure I understand that.
okay, so we can't come in and offer a service that someone would normally contract with a private entity. Is that correct?
This is strictly volunteer on his part.
I'm just saying as a group, we can't coordinate this with Melbourne Village because someone else was offering. So if your firm said, hey, we want to do this for Melbourne Village, and we're as a group saying, hey, well, we want to take care of it for them, is there an issue with that, or are we allowed to do that?
I don't think the city has any role with regard to Melbourne Village.
Okay,
I mean,
so
I don't think that, I mean, unless the city of unless Melbourne Village came to you and said, we are requesting your assistance to help us, which I don't think they're doing, you don't really, the city of West Melbourne has no role with regard to the Melbourne Village. So this is just something that is, and again, we're talking about Melbourne Village because that is a situation that your former city attorney was involved with. But as long as the other representation doesn't interfere with the duties here, the city really has no role in that.
okay, I just want to make sure.
So again, I mean, you know, as a practicing lawyer, when you have a law degree, you can do a lot of things, right? And you can do some things outside of your own employment, pro bono, one of those things, you know, that don't interfere with your job duties. As long as that's not an issue, I mean, from my perspective as a lawyer, that wouldn't bother me as long as it wasn't, as a member of the board, as long as the work was getting done and it wasn't interfering or it wasn't a conflict. I mean, the main concern would be if you had an attorney who was working for a lot of different clients and you had conflicts with that within the city, and then they would be prevented from doing the city's work because of these conflicts, or they couldn't work on the city's work because they were too busy working on other work. But that's really not what the intent of that section is. The intent of that section is just to allow the attorney the flexibility to be able to do these other limited scope representations that don't have any effect on the work that's being done at West Melbourne.
And I thank you. And I know Mr. Carey, I believe, was watching. He was asked not to come tonight, so there wouldn't be much of an issue with the contract issue. I just want him to know that I don't believe, and I hope that the rest of you don't have an expectation that he's expected to go and do this work at another jurisdiction. I don't think that you know, that it's completely voluntary on his part, and we hold nothing, you know, one way or the other. So.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
I think it's important to remember both our former attorney and Mr. Carey are professionals. I mean, they knew these contracts. I know that Mr. Richardson had many more years being in West Melbourne. Mr. Carey would be new if we move forward with our contract. So I think the concern is if we approve his contract and he came in tomorrow, next week, and immediately was asked to perform a service or go elsewhere, that might be concerning because he's new. We really want to make sure he understands our systems. He can step in and really take care of some of the things that have been, while Mr. Eppinger is doing great, it'll be great to have a city attorney to focus on the things that we need in the legal department. But I think, long term, and we're hoping that Mr. Carey stays long term, I think we trust them to be professionals, and if he feels he can take on the additional work because it does help out other cities, I think we should be able to give him that flexibility where it's not a requirement, but if he chooses to do so and, we see the benefits of people helping people, that's important. Especially if we're going to leave the pro bono in there, I don't think it's right to say you can do the work if it's for free, but don't get paid. I just personally don't think that's right.
Did you want to make a motion?
I'd like to say something.
Oh, not your turn yet, but.
Well,
Yeah.
It's pushing you into a motion, but go ahead.
Well, I want to know what council thinks about, are we okay with the flexibility?
Well, we can discuss
Is
that.
that the
after we get
motion? Okay, so I will make the motion to approve the contract as written.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley? Second. Ms. Young?
Second.
Deputy Mayor Young?
Thank you, Mayor. I remember during the meeting where we had to be here at 3:30 to speak to Mr. Carey, I remember him bringing it up that he said Mr. Richardson had been doing some work for Melbourne Village, and he would like to continue doing that. I remember him sitting right there saying that. And I also know that Mr. Carey was referred to as one of the three other counselors that were referred to us by Mr. Richardson. So he was already fully aware of this. I don't think this is anything we're putting on him or expect him to do. He was aware, and he's already said, and I'd have to watch it, the video to quote him, but I know he said he would like to continue doing that. So I don't think it's an issue. I also don't think it should be for free. If he's going to do it, he should be getting paid for it. And I also think that he's excited enough and wants to be West Melbourne's attorney, so he can be the attorney where he lives, that he's going to put West Melbourne first anyway. And he's certainly going to know that he's new here, and although he may be a resident of the city, he does want to learn the city's business priority over anything else. So I don't have a problem with that at all. Thank you.
Yeah, I would concur with that, and that's what he told me. He'll do this on the side. It's basically just extra money if it's available. We don't even know if Melbourne Village is going to hire him. I don't think they've had that discussion, so we're kind of premature here. Just also, you need to know that we've sent our building officials over there to help them. They don't have a person when they pave their road to inspect that. We send our person over there. So I think we help Melbourne sometimes. They help us. Palm Bay sometimes too. Let's just put them out there. So I think all the cities need to work together when possible, and that's what we should do. The sheriff comes over here and helps us on certain things and vice versa. So nobody's an island here, and I think we need to work together. Mr. Frampus.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple things. Was our building inspector compensated on a sign?
Don't know.
No, I doubt it. Mr. Rhodey, are you compensated when you go to other cities for conflict resolution?
I have never been, but after hearing Cliff's speech, I should have charged.
So I'm perfectly fine with if we put some wording in there that he could potentially be used for conflict resolution and not on a regular basis if it comes up to some conflict where another city needs our attorney and he gets compensated for that. I would have no problem with that. My problem is using somebody on a regular basis, like Mr. Ditmore said. I think Mr. Richardson was the attorney of record for Melbourne Village, and I just don't think that should be. And I respect that during the interview, Deputy Mayor, you're absolutely correct. He said he would continue doing the job, but he was trying to get the job. He also said that one of his concerns was he was the only attorney here, and that if he didn't feel that he could do the job, he would let us know that we need to hire more staff for his benefit for being the attorney. So that concerns me that he would have that concern, and also we're encouraging him to go out and do other work. So I think it's a red flag, and if we addressed it right from the beginning, it wouldn't be a problem down the road. Thank you.
I don't think that's how I took his, if there was a mission or a liability that he couldn't defend, then he would hire outside counsel if he doesn't think he can defend it, just to show up. That was my understanding. Mr. McDowell?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that there's, and I'm going to make is it typical, though, for attorneys to consult without any kind of compensation anyway? I mean, they would just out of professional courtesy, if it was a real simple question, they'll ask, right?
I missed the first.
The relationship between attorneys, they can ask for some general.
Absolutely, we do it all the time.
Billable hours.
We do it all the
involved.
time.
So I think that maybe what I think he was looking for was, and I think there's plenty of attorneys that would probably be willing to help him if he gets into a simple, yes, no kind of question. But it helped me with the idea that going outside and using those services. So I'm fully on board. I think we're okay.
Also, as I recall, Melbourne Village, if they need an attorney, they don't have an attorney at every meeting. If they think they have something, they do that the first of the meeting, the attorney gets in and gets out, doesn't even stay the whole meeting. I think that's what they do a lot of times. Mr. Ditmore, then Ms. Adams.
Mayor, I just want to address a comment that you made about what we do normally about sending our staff over to other cities or whatever. The difference when we send staff to other cities, they have their own staff that do these type of things. We may go there to assist. I don't think that we should be going to subsidize, correct, thank you, subsidizing another jurisdiction who doesn't have that because they don't put it in their budget to pay for it to have those things done. There's a lot of companies that contract building officials out. They can do that PRN work at $200 an hour. So there's things, I just don't think we should be doing that, and we can address that later with staff to make sure that we're on the same page there. But I just want to address that because you made that comment. Thank you.
Ms. Adams.
Since Melbourne Village is the semi-topic of discussion, how many hours on average would you say per month Mr. Richardson was serving?
Nobody knows. I would have no idea and would only be speculating.
It's a very, I couldn't tell you the number of hours. I know it's a very limited assignment. I know that.
I'm just wondering, because I think by including this language, Mr. Frampus had said, we'd be encouraging Mr. Carey to take this or any other, outside representation that comes forward. But I don't see it as encouraging him. I see it as giving him the flexibility to make that decision himself. And I trust his professionalism to say, yes, I have the bandwidth to take that on, or you know what, I'm full with West Melbourne things, this isn't the right fit for me. And I would think as a professional attorney, he would know the difference to be able to say, you know what, Melbourne Village or anyone else, if he's at capacity, you need to find somebody else.
That is exactly the way you should interpret that provision.
Very good.
Thank you.
Seeing that, then let's call for the vote. A motion and second on the floor. All those in favor of ratifying this contract, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 6-1 with Mr. Frampus voting nay. The next item we have is award bid of 3 production wells and 3 monitoring wells.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. As you're aware, we have reached a number of milestones on our path to developing our own water plant. A number of those I highlighted in the staff report. One of those was in July of 2020 when Council authorized the construction of our first test production well. What we're bringing forward this evening is a project that would complete the remaining 3 production wells as well as 3 monitoring wells that are required as part of our consumptive use permit issued by St. John's River Water Management District. So we had 2 bidders for this work. 2 were both very qualified contractors. The bids were a fraction of 1% off from each other, so very close in the cost, what they bid. The big difference is that one of the bidders had stipulated that they could only begin the work after a full year goes by and then required additional time to complete that work. So staff and the engineering firm that we work with for many of the water plant pieces, Hazen and Sawyer, are recommending award of the bid to A.C. Schultz in the amount of $3,071,560. $2.6 million was allocated in the this fiscal year budget 22-23. So happy to answer any questions, but we were pleased to have received 2 proposals from contractors. 5 had originally come to town to take a look at the project. Several had indicated they just have too much work right now and they just aren't going to be able to bid, so we were pleased that we received a couple from very qualified contractors. So our recommendation would be that you would authorize the city manager to execute an agreement in the amount of $3,071,560 with AC Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Bentley.
Yeah, I'd make a motion with questions, but the motion would be that we authorize the city manager to execute an agreement in the amount of $3 million and change with AC Schultz.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
I'll second. I have questions as well.
Okay, Mr. Bentley, you're first.
Yeah, Tom, you didn't, maybe I didn't hear everything. The person's asking for $3 million. We have budgeted 2.6. Where's the other 400K? Is that next fiscal year or?
It very likely could be. So what we would do is we're going to keep an eye on construction progress, and so it's a 210-day construction agreement, but they're going to need some time to order materials, source those things, and then mobilize and begin work probably early January. So early next year, start in on the construction piece because there's some long lead times on some of the materials. In fact, one of the items specified is just not available, and so we're going to have to come up with an alternative product in place of that. One of the casings, I believe, for one of the 3 production wells that was specified just isn't available, so we're going to have to adjust some of the materials there.
Okay.
So it's possible that they would complete in this fiscal year, but it's also possible it's going to extend. So this would get us started. Should it become necessary, if we see that they're going to complete this fiscal year, we would bring back a budget amendment for approval through council.
And then do you have the same package we have in front of you or no?
I do.
I'm looking at page 8C-4.
I should have said I have the materials. I don't know that I have an 8C-4.
Well, I'm not sure if this is backwards or if I just don't understand.
This is Hazen memorandum.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if this is just a mistake or if I'm misinterpreting it. On the chart toward the bottom, it says production wells without utility conflicts, and then below with utility conflicts. And it seems to me if we have conflicts, it would cost more. And this is shown backwards in my case.
Well, there are 2 of the two wells do not have conflicts. 2 of the production wells. 1 production well does have a conflict. And so it is. So when you take the 1,269,100, divide that by 2, that's actually the cost of each well. So then, without conflicts. So then the well with a conflict is 847,570.
And I was thinking of it wrong. I was thinking that if it came across a conflict, it would cost.
Yeah, no. So we already know, and I can elaborate a little bit on that.
That's all right. I understand.
Okay.
I was thinking if you were talking about if it comes to conflict, it's going to cost less.
Yeah, we know we're within 50
well, that doesn't
feet
make
of another
sense.
utility in that particular area, so it's going to require casing.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams?
It's exciting to see water projects moving forward for West Melbourne.
It is.
The question that I had was, I noticed there was a discrepancy, same page, 8C-4. The aquifer performance test, the engineer's estimate was $10,000, and yet both of the bids came in for that piece at $100,000 and $125,000. That is a huge difference.
We don't disagree.
Okay, was there a reason?
So we spoke with the Hazen, the firm we work with, and asked them that same exact question. And the response was that the aquifer performance test requirement by St. John's River Water Management District is for 30 days. And so Hazen believes that the reason why there's that discrepancy is the contractor believes they have to be mobilized and have somebody on site for all 30 of the days while the testing is being conducted, which is not necessarily the case. So there may be some room for us to work with the contractor on details like that and sort of value engineer that and say, you know, look, you don't have to have staff there on the well site while that performance testing is being done. We can automate some of that and collect the data and still capture the testing information we need to provide for St. John's. But there may have been sort of a misunderstanding that they had to have staff on site the entire duration of the 30 days while that testing is being conducted.
Okay, so they both companies kind of assumed that.
It appears to be the case, yes.
Okay, so then ideally, if we do move forward with either of these contracts, then that conversation can happen, and we're expecting it maybe to fall closer to that 10,000, or is that anywhere in between that it could fall?
Conversations need to occur, and they will, addressing that specific detail, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Frampus?
Thank you, Mayor. We have the locations for the production wells. Are the monitor wells going in the same location?
So the monitoring wells, the 3 monitoring wells will be spread across the well field. So
Are the 3 production wells going close to each other?
There are more than 1,000 feet, of separation, and in most cases, you're 2,000 to 3,000 feet separation. And there'll be one of the monitoring wells kind of right in the center of, if you can kind of, it's sort of like a diamond almost where those are. There's going to be a monitoring well in that well field, and then one on either side outside of the well field to monitor in and around the well field from the production wells.
Are they temporary or are they?
Permanent.
Permanent?
Permanent.
And if we approve this now and there is savings, like Ms. Adams pointed out, where, does that just come off the contract or?
Yeah, we would do a deduct change order for the reduction in scope.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell.
Thank you, Mayor. So you answered my second question. My first question, is that typical of a 5-point contingent? I mean, is that what we do? I normally would not look at this level of detail, but when you have $3 million,
absolutely,
5 points is almost $150,000.
5%. So if there's no reason to spend that money, and the owner never authorizes that money to be spent, it won't be spent and it stays with the city. So that is contingency, owner directed only. So that's not for them just to spend for what
I
they
understand.
decide.
I understand the project and I understand contingencies. I'm just saying is 5 points, 5% points, it's pretty typical for a $3 million project.
5% is what we typically put on
any contract. And if it's $300,000, it's not $150,000.
Correct.
So that's why I'm just saying it's a big number.
Absolutely.
It's a big number.
Right.
But you answered my second question was, if it comes in under, we will know that as well.
Right.
But what's on the table right now is approving at that amount with that $146,000. Okay.
What did the first well cost versus these 3?
I have that number right here, $553,050.
So these are a lot more?
Well, when you look at, so that was without a conflict, and so it didn't necessarily need the casing, I don't believe. And if that's the case, then when you divide 1.2 million, you're at 640 something versus the 533. So yeah, it's increased. That was back in 2020. Work has picked up. So it has increased, but on a percentage basis.
Then let me see if I got these numbers right, because 3 million is a lot more than 600 times 3.
Right. So, but this includes 3 production wells, 3 monitoring wells, aquifer performance testing. The other was the construction of a single production well, test production well.
And so when these are completed, where does St. John's come into this with a cut permit?
So we've already received the CUP. We received that in December of 21, so this past December. And so we've already been issued that, but there are a number of conditions. So we've been issued the permit, but there are a number of conditions we have to meet, one of which is installing these monitoring wells and maintaining them for the duration of the operation of our well field.
So is there a chance that?
So they're involved throughout the process, and so we'll be feeding them data from the test wells, the production wells, ongoing basis, every year, quarterly report type stuff. So that they're going to be getting information, and they'll be involved throughout the process.
But there's no way for them to stop the project?
As long as we meet those conditions. We've been issued the permit and can proceed. As long as we meet the conditions of that permit, which is what this in part does by implementing the wells that they require.
And everything's spelled out. I mean, I know they keep coming back with other projects and changing the rules, so.
Yeah, we have it. We have the permit along with the list of the conditions that are, are required to be met, and we intend to meet those as they're laid out.
Thank you. Mr. Frampus?
Yeah, just to follow up with the monitoring wells, we did not put one in for the first production well, so
No, sir.
we don't need one there. Is what?
Well, so they're looking at it for the full well field. We just put one in so that we could pull sample data, and then we also used that well to feed the pilot plant so that we could identify some of the chemistry that we're going to be working with and some of the filtration
for the
that we want to
future
do.
monitoring, we don't need it. It seems like we need one for each well. That's why I was.
No, it's not one for each well. It's 3 of them are going to monitor in and around the well field that we're
Okay,
drawing
thank you.
from.
So when all comes online, are we going to use all 4 or just start out using 3?
So what we don't want to do is overdraw from the wells, and so we want to be very conservative in that. Because if we do overdraw from the wells, you run into something, or you can run into something called upconing, where you're bringing water from below the upper Florida aquifer into that, and you don't want to, mess up the aquifer by bringing, overdrawing. And so we would be using all of them, potentially rotating, potentially not running them at capacity. So the details of when and how they're going to run is still being developed as part of the water plant overall. But this provides the raw capacity that we would need. We also are permitted to add an additional 5th well if it became necessary down the road. Right now, we don't believe we need that, but it is permitted, so we could, in the future, add that if we had to.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Good job.
Our next item is Police Chief contract.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I am very excited to bring forward the finalists that we've selected, Chief Gregory Vesta. Again, just kind of recapping the process. I apologize, got to put my glasses on. Started with 54 candidates, 54 resumes, went through the process of narrowing that down, ended up with 8 finalists, had a nice meet and greet interview weekend, September 9th and 10th. Selected a finalist from that group of interviews. Ultimately, spent a good week in conversation with that finalist and working on terms of an agreement. As you will notice, there is no contract. This is when it switched over from being a report to the council to a report to the city manager, it became more of a department head position. And so while there are terms for the agreement, there's no contract like Mr. Carrier or myself have with the city council. So worked on those terms, got those finalized. Had a good process with a background check, started to get underway, and then had him scheduled to come in. And unfortunately, the hurricane had different plans for us, and so that kind of put us back. So we were hoping to have this for last council meeting. Due to the hurricane, had to push some of those things back. Ultimately, has gone through an extensive background check that we've outlined in the staff memo, and come up with the terms and conditions for his employment, and we are very excited. Obviously, hoping for confirmation this evening, and with that confirmation, he'll be able to give notice, and then is looking to get down here in the next 30 days. So we're hoping to have him boots on the ground in 30 days from the confirmation this evening. So very excited. Him and his wife were in town for the physical and polygraph and different items that we had put him through, and had a chance to have dinner with him, and he's really excited, and him and his wife are really excited to get down here and get going on this. So I am asking for, certainly open to questions, but asking for confirmation of Chief Gregory Vesta.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley?
Thank you, Mayor. I would make a motion that we, with question again, confirm the city manager selection of Gregory Vesta to serve as the city's police chief.
Ms. Adams?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, I just had one question. Are all your direct reports Tier 2 level employees?
Only one, he's the only one because he's in the police pension. He's not in FRS. Different pension.
Thank you.
But good question. If you'd like to make the city manager part of the police pension, I would be open to that. Sorry, just some humor.
Mr. Frampus?
On that same lines, I know I just found out a little bit about the Tier 2 membership today. Can you explain that a little bit more on what that is? Seems to be a significant benefit, so
Sure. Tier 2 for FRS or Tier 2 for the police pension?
Well, it applies to the police pension here, so you might as well explain
Sure.
ours. Is it different?
Councilman, I will be totally honest, I could muddle through this answer, but we literally have an expert in the room who could walk us through. I would defer to HR Director Curran, who can walk us through the difference between the Tier 1 and Tier 2 police pension.
I will not say expert. So Tier 2 came into effect 2010-ish, I believe it was. Everybody was switched over at that point in time, all new hires. They are a contribution of 8.44% of their pay. Tier 1 is 8.54%. I believe COLA drop, some of those things are affected based on Tier 2, versus Tier 1.
What was the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2?
So your contribution is one of them, and then I have to look back, but it's your COLA and or your drop. I don't think you were able to be part of drop.
You can be part of drop.
I think drop was
dropped,
and so was COLA. And healthcare, the $10 a month healthcare.
So give me those numbers again. Tier 1 is what?
Tier 1, you have all the benefits, so you get drop, COLA, the $10 a month for number of years service towards healthcare, and you're contributing 8.54%.
8.54.
Tier 2 is a contribution of 8.44%, but you don't get the drop, COLA, and the.
So just a little bit less
Correct.
percentage.
Correct. Those were changes that they made.
Right.
Back around 2008 to 2010.
Yeah.
Tier 2 is what every new police employee would come in at.
And that's a Florida regulation?
No.
That's our municipal pension plan regulation.
That's our police pension program.
Is it mirrored from Florida? I was under the understanding it was a regulation that.
Councilman,
Florida laid
I
down.
think you are right on with your questioning. For city manager and city attorney, there is an executive level of the Florida pension, which gives you 1% more. So it's a 3% instead of a 2% on your retirement. I believe that's referenced as the executive level. Am I saying that right?
Executive gets 2%.
So we contribute more to their pension with a Tier 2 than we would with a Tier.
For the Florida system, but for the police, there is no, if you are hired after the certain date that the new police pension went into effect, you are a Tier 2 police pension member. It's not as if we choose when we hire a new police officer.
I thought it was a benefit that we were providing.
Nope. Tier 2 is just for any employee hired after 10 years ago, 2010.
Oh, okay, that's
Everybody.
a little more clear. I thought it was some optional thing we were given. Okay, thank you.
Also, can you double check on I know the COLA dropped off with the Tier 2. I'm not positive that the drop did.
I would have to go back and look at it.
Yeah, I don't think that did, but yeah.
We're researching.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. Mr. Ditmore?
So it's a 3% multiplier for retirement, correct? So, okay. All right, and just.
For FRS.
No,
that's for the police. That's for the police. So
That's everybody.
I thought senior management was 2% and 3% was for elected officials and for the police. I could have sworn it was 2% for senior management.
And it's 1.6
for everyone else. Pretty sure. Pretty sure you're 2%.
Yeah, you are.
I'm going on 3 weeks of having the different tier of retirement.
I want to disappoint you, but I think you're 2%, but yeah.
I'm not sure on that.
All right.
So I will defer to others that know
3%
that.
though for us for the high risk.
Thanks.
The
I
high
just didn't
risk,
want to go too
for high
far
risk, yeah,
outside of our
police and
motion.
fire. Yeah.
All right.
All right,
We
thank
have a
you.
motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Into a retirement discussion.
We want him to work, not retire.
And our last item is purchase of police vehicles.
Good evening again. This item originally came before you back in July of 2021. If you remember, we came before you early prior to the beginning of the fiscal year to order police vehicles. Because of the delay in receiving vehicles, they did not arrive in time. We didn't take receipt of the vehicles prior to the end of the fiscal year. So this request here is for the City Council to approve a budget amendment for the current fiscal year in the amount of $170,900 to account for the vehicles that you've previously approved.
Mr. Ditmore?
So I just want to clarify, this is not costing us any extra money. We're just basically moving it into this budget year, correct? Okay. I make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2022-22 to increase the 22-23 fiscal budget by $170,900 to account for the vehicles ordered in 2021 that did not arrive in the previous fiscal year, and it'll be arriving this coming fiscal year.
Ms.
That was
Adams?
a tongue twister.
I will second. Are these vehicles still delayed?
Yes, we were expecting them last week, and as of right this minute, they're not here still.
Do we have any update on when we might expect them, or are they just,
The update that we got was about 2 weeks ago that it was supposed to be last week.
gotcha, thank you.
So last week when we approved the other cars, why didn't you tell us about this and put this on this fiscal year then?
Because we didn't know the timing of everything, and once we received confirmation that we should be receiving them, now it's on the agenda.
Okay. So this was in the budget for last year, and we didn't receive it, so you didn't allocate that money for,
So it was kind of a chicken or the egg. If there's a chance that we hope we will get last year's vehicles this year, there is a chance we will not get this year's vehicles this budget year. So we could have either waited to see if that happened and then did a budget amendment, or because the city manager is new and doesn't want to get in trouble with the auditors, came forward with the budget amendment now, hoping that we will get the 3 vehicles we ordered this year, this calendar year. So it was either wait to see if we get them and do the budget amendment when we get them, or do the budget amendment ahead of time.
and this money will come out of our police vehicle fund?
Correct. So this is already budgeted money, so we're moving it out of that into this year. So if we do, hopefully, which we honestly hope to get the 3 vehicles from last year and the 3 vehicles from this year, in this budget year, we will have enough money in the budget because of this amendment.
And these last year are last year's model, not this year's model?
I believe so, yes.
I'm sorry?
I believe so, yes.
But we're not sure what year?
I could look it up for you.
Okay.
It's in the packet.
2022s?
The quote is for 2022.
So that's
last year's.
last year's model, okay. But we also have budgeted for 2023 models, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. All right.
That's not part of this, though.
No, I understand. Are these the exact same vehicles, though? I mean, they're all,
The only difference could be, and I hate to bring this up because I don't know, but we were told that they were waiting on chips for rear air conditioning.
oh my gosh, liability, like you said before. I'm just saying. All right, yeah, that's,
That could be the only difference.
all right. All right, we have motion on the floor. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Council reports, Councilmember Ditmore. Councilmember Bentley.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Thank you, Mayor. I did attend the Space Coast League of Cities dinner. I think it was last week. Interesting discussions that we had during the Board of Directors meeting. And probably won't go into the details, but hopefully we're working toward a better process going forward. So, I think in the end it was a positive outcome. Also went to the Palm Bay Chamber recognition event that they put on for a lot of folks. And, I just think Nancy does a really good job as leader of that organization. And, I think they do bring value to their respective cities. So, it was, fun to attend, and I think they do a really good job. And then along with a few other city council members, I did attend the Randy Fine Farm Aid event. And, if you're not going to that and you have a chance, and not everybody does, I understand, consider going out to it. We're only there for about 3 or 4 hours. It's hot, I give you that. It's cooling off now, I think. But it's really a great event and really helps a lot of folks. So if you get the opportunity to come out and hand out food, this time we had too much food. Last time we ran out and had hundreds of people in line. And what made that kind of nice this time is, the three of us got to fill up the truck and go deliver to churches and other food banks. And so that's just kind of a nice thing to get to do, to surprise people with a truckload of food that they can add to their food banks. It's just kind of really satisfying. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, very good. Deputy Mayor Young.
Thank you, Mayor. I met with some residents in West Melbourne who had recently come back from an Alaska cruise. And apparently in Alaska, I've been to cool places, but I've never been to Alaska. But in the state of Alaska, they frown on litter, and they don't have plastic bottles, and they use these bottles, these aluminum bottles. These can be recycled endlessly. They have no termination. I guess it can be aluminum window one day and a bottle the next day. But I thought that was really neat. They brought it back for me, had me come over there, explain to me how this works. I thought that was a great idea. Look at all the litter and all the trash that we have just in our little city here. And in Alaska, they take their littering seriously. Their wrappers and things from their fast food restaurants are different. I don't know if you've been to Alaska. Maybe you found the same thing. Maybe you didn't find litter or not. But I know that that's where this bottle came from, and I told them I would bring it and let the rest of us know. I wish we could do something about the litter that we have here. Also wanted to mention TPO. We're getting our priorities, roads all together here. Ellis Road is still priority, seems to be priority for everyone. MPO in Orlando, I have that Friday, so that'll be an all-day meeting over there, and I'll bring back a report from MPO, which is like TPO, only different, just with a different letter. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you. And I also attended the Palm Bay Chamber, and I do concur. Nancy does a terrific job at keeping us all abreast of current events. And I've attended the Brevard Cultural Alliance Summit. I attended the Faith in Florida at the American Legions on early October, as well as the League of Cities for the Space Coast. Oh, and then I also was invited to attend a workshop for the USDA on the natural resources to look at the various, there were about 20 different categories that the federal government puts out there, and to help identify what were the most important things that USDA should be doing. And it was a work group that consisted of agriculture, water districts, and whatnot. It's quite interesting. It's part of the soil and water conservation team, so I did that. Went down south to Wellington to work on the diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of a elected official. Did that, and these are things that I've taken out of my own pocket, so it's not like I asked the city to pay for those things. That is it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Councilmember Adams is next.
I'll echo the Space Coast League of Cities, the Palm Bay Chamber events, the Farm Share event. They were all very well done, very well organized. It was pleasure to volunteer with you again. I know that they're already organizing another farm share event in November. If you can come out and volunteer. It doesn't get too hot. We get only 11. And then additionally, I attended a water management and resiliency webinar. And specifically, I chose to attend because it was talking a lot about Florida and flood mitigation, our septic to sewer programs and things like that I know West Melbourne has been focusing on over the past few years. So it was interesting as they brought in experts from different organizations around the state to talk about different projects that areas are doing, how to better utilize the funds you have allocated to those resources and things like that. So it was just a really interesting webinar that I thought was really relevant to West Melbourne. Additionally, I did want to ask Mr. Rohde, can we get an update on the storm debris pickup? I've been contacted by a couple of residents who are just concerned because it's still out there, so I just wanted to check on where everything was.
So due to popular demand of residents asking where we are at with the pickup, which we do get a lot of calls, and for the most part, people have been patient and cooperative. The county did set up an interactive mapping system, and we just got that link earlier today. Tammy just forwarded it to me this evening, and so I am happy to share that link, but it's on their page. It's not quite Amazon delivery, but it does show all the quadrants of the county where the services are being requested, and then where the trucks are at in which area. They are now in West Melbourne. They started at the north part of West Melbourne on the public roads, and they do have 4 dedicated trucks, and they move quadrant by quadrant. They do a 2-tiered pickup system, so they come through and they try to get the biggest piles first, and then work with the trucks based on what room they have, and then they come through on a second and final cleanup and pick up everything. So the good news is they're finally here. The bad news is they had to start somewhere, and they didn't start in West Melbourne. So.
What about the private contractor that we hired for the gated communities?
So we did hire a company called DCI in the gated communities, and other than one small subdivision that was accidentally missed, they did do a good job and completed last weekend. And so they've been done for a full week. And now Waste Management is back to normal pickup in those neighborhoods. As far as if you just have a couple palm prawns out, they'll get out of the truck and get those again. And so we're kind of back to normal in those. And then with any luck here, by the tail end of this week, we should at least get the bulk of the items picked up in West Melbourne.
Thank you, sir. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Frampus?
Just to touch on the debris pickup a little bit, I was a little disappointed with Waste Management, as when they were told we were doing our waste pickup for the landscaping stuff, they decided to not pick up stuff on the ground when they came through, and they only took up the cans. So where they normally had picked up fronds, 2 or 3 fronds people had on the ground, they decided to come in and not do that because we were coming through, and I was a little disappointed in that. But besides that, I think it went pretty well in our community, and I appreciate the city doing that. I did find out that there is a possibility we may be able to be compensated for that with FEMA. When I was over in Tampa at an email class on the 14th and 15th, and talking to somebody from Fort Myers and Venice, they said that they were getting compensated for going into communities if the community signed off on some paperwork, and I know Mr. Rohde's checking into that also. So the city might get compensated through FEMA for going into the private community. So I thought that was good news. And besides the email class, I had nothing else to report. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll finish up a lot of the same things. The Palm Bay Chamber, Space Coast League of Cities, that was pretty good this time. One of the things that they ask us to do, though, is as a city, come up with our legislative goals. What do we want to promote? And I believe they'll be voting on that soon, so city management, if you have any legislative goals that you want brought forward and pushed by the cities, we need to get that in soon.
Parking reform, no.
But if we don't have a goal, somebody else will, and that will supersede. Also, like the others were saying, the farm aid, passing out food, it was really a non-political event, and a lot of needy people got in line. It wrapped all the way around as far as the eye could see. Probably 500 cars, I'm guessing, but again, they had a lot more food this time. It just varies, the different types of food. So people were really appreciative of it. So that's just a good community thing. And I think they're going to try to do one after the election as well, but we'll see what happens on that. Also, on November 12th, Space Coast Honor Flight will take 25 veterans. This is their 70th flight. They'll take them to Washington, D.C. So if you're able to go out there in Melbourne, it's 1-something at night, earlier this time than normal, and they fly to Orlando to Washington, D.C. direct. So it's really a neat thing. If you haven't done that, or if you have done that, it's really worth your time. Nothing else happens after midnight except that's a good thing. So that's all I have. And any questions for city management? I think not. Then we'll adjourn this meeting at 10:13.